War and rumors of war. Yes, we are going back. Maybe. I guess it hasn't really even been decided yet as to what we are doing because Israel and Iran are going back at it again. So we're going to talk about the timeline, what's happened with that, the decisions that are being made, and, well, my thoughts on world policing. So we'll go over all of that. And I think the most entertaining part of this is the major split in the Republican Party over this one very issue. But we'll go over all of that, and that's probably going to be a vast majority of the show here today because, well, let's be completely frank. I've been open about this since we started doing contemporary, and I hate war. But we do have other news to go over here today. In other news, a person dresses up in a police uniform and kills one Minnesota representative and her husband, injures another, I believe kills that person's spouse as well, and visits two other homes of Minnesota politicians in one of probably the strangest stories that I've heard. And, well, let's be completely realistic. I don't buy this at face value, and I don't think anybody else should either, but we'll go over all of that, what's happening with that, and where we go with that. A simultaneous protest across America coinciding with the parade celebrating the 250th birthday of the military, which, I mean, as we all know by this point because we're all on social media, happened to coincide with Trump's birthday, makes very little headline, actually. We're going to talk about the non-coverage that the mainstream media is coming off with this, what actually happened, where we go with that, and where we go there. And since we're staying on the immigration front, not the Supreme Court, a federal court has blocked California from recalling the National Guard, allowing Trump to keep the federalized National Guard in Los Angeles while the riots are, I guess, not ongoing. I guess they've slowed down at this point, but we'll talk about the decision, where that's going to go, and up to the Supreme Court, and possibly get yet another decision that was in a gray area prior to this. So we're going to talk about all of this and more over here on Contemporary. So strap yourselves in, find some breakfast, get your coffee. I got my coffee right here because we will see you over on the other side of the break. And I walk a lonely avenue. I never thought I'd meet a girl like you. Meet a girl like you. With auburn hair and tawny eyes. The kind of eyes that hypnotize me through. Hypnotize me through. And I ran. I ran so far away. I just ran. I ran all night and day. I couldn't get away. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar. We have got a ton of stuff to go over here today over on Contemporary. So, strap yourselves in and, well, let's get started with a lot of things. The usual vault rules apply. I would love to hear what it is that you have to say about anything that I'm talking about on this, but because this particular feed is a live stream, those of you who are listening back on the audio platform on places like Spotify or watching the replay on YouTube have no idea what I'm talking about right now, but this is the live feed as well that I'm talking to. If you are on your morning commute, if you are headed out to the office, to your job, to school, even though it's summer break right now and the vast majority of you do not have school right now, or any place else that your morning commute takes you, do not text and drive. Well, you guys can put a comment on the video after the fact, or if there's something that you want to see and talk about there, but stay safe first. And in the exchange of that, because I know a lot of you are commuting and many of you are taking the kids to daycare and whatnot, I will curb my language on this particular live stream, as I do every single morning we do this, because, well, I know that your kids are probably going to eventually learn that funny word that starts with an F. I just don't want them to hear it from Uncle J. Edgar. So, but we do have a lot to go over here today. This is, well, this is news in Trump era 2 on a weekly show and not a daily show anymore. So yes, of course we're going to go for 4 hours at a time every single time, because why the hell wouldn't we? I mean, seriously, why wouldn't we go back and do something like this? But we've got a lot to go over here today. So today is Juneteenth. I was going to go to the bank, but then it was Juneteenth. I was going to go get my business done, but then it was Juneteenth. And now I'm worried about my bills. Because it was Juneteenth, because it was Juneteenth, because it was Juneteenth. We'll talk about that at the top of the show. Before we get started, make sure you go check out great programming such as the Voice of Steven. Yes, the Ignoramus moniker has gone away. I missed completely texting him over this. A few of my life events have taken priority. I've got an unread message from my dad, too, sitting on my phone. So it's not just Steven right now, but anyway, I got to reach out to him. Go check out the Voice of Steven, which will probably be rolling right after we get off air here. So anyway, go and check that. Also, go and check out Crime Land with Katie Zed. Go check that out. It's an awesome time, and, you know, great person to come with. And, well, we're going to get right down into the news. We're going to talk a lot about Iran. We're going to talk about the Federal Reserve, non-cut, because, well, why wouldn't we do anything else like that? We're going to talk about Vance Belter. Not Vince, Vance. We've got some fun stuff on things I like, things that I hate. We're going to talk about, I mean, we have a lot of information here, but there's only like 4 topics this morning. So, a lot of stuff going on with that, a lot of stuff to go there, and I hope to have a great time. I get to come back and scream into a microphone about things that I believe in. Whether or not you have a great time depends on you. So, we're going to get at it, we're going to get started, and let's see what it is that we have going. And I'm actually going to start today talking a little bit about Juneteenth. The thing with Juneteenth, before I read the other X with the little bit of history about all this here, is I want to remind everybody that the holiday itself was a virtue signal. The fact that it's out in a bank holiday, an official one. It was a, evil Donald Trump is, he's going to take away the thing, man. He's going to try and put you all back in chains. So I'm going to make this a federal holiday where I remind you that there's no more slavery, even though you know that already. And the things that go with that. It was a reach out, it was a virtue signal, but it was a planned virtue signal. It was something that our friends on the left were already planning if they were to take power in 2020, which they did. Going back into the Trump administration, I remind you, we were looking at this in 2019. Was it 19 or 20? I think it was 20. Yeah, it was 20. Because Elaine and I were actually talking about this on the Red Ned show back at the time, and we did that for 3 quarters in 2020. But her and I were talking, I had never heard of this thing before, and she insisted to the world that everybody in any American school should have known what Juneteenth was already. And no, we did not learn that in school. I'm not sitting here and saying it was a made-up thing by any stretch of the imagination. And from what I understand, knowing people that live in Texas, it was something that was celebrated in Texas long before it became a federal thing in 2020 under the Trump administration. But that was just it. They started making a huge deal out of this thing that it existed. It's just nobody really talked about outside of Texas because it was mainly a Texas thing. It was a celebration of when the last slaves were found out about the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas. But it was astroturfed and was brought up to the forefront of everything. And again, this was for people who had no idea the fact that this even existed. I do think it's a good thing, and honestly, I kind of wish that it would have been a federal holiday long before this. But in today's polarized climate, it was put on basically as a virtue signal, as a vote buy from the Democrat Party to the black communities to come back on and say, "Hey, look, I gave a holiday for you guys." And the irony of it, of course, before I read the X post that talks about this, and we'll switch the news scene here, in case you want to go back and get a little bit of a sneak peek of this. The irony of the fact that this is a federal holiday celebrating the final emancipation of slaves in Texas is the fact that the vast majority of people who are affected by this are white upper middle class people. That's right. This has nothing to do, and honestly, the federal holidays, this goes right on to the same thing I say about Election Day being a federal holiday. Because that one drives me up a wall when people come out and say, well, we need more people to vote, so Election Day should be a federal holiday. When is the last time you got a day off as a working class person if you're working in a gas station, a grocery store, or things like that on a federal holiday? A dealership, a sales sometimes, car dealership, not truck dealership. Places like that. You always work on federal holidays, constantly. Real estate agents, I'm sure, probably work on federal holidays, but that's probably for a different reason. Well, no, it's not for a different reason. A lot of well, I guess real estate would be a more white-collar thing as well, but a lot of these working class people that people are trying to reach out to work on federal holidays. The grocery store has huge sales for Labor Day, Memorial Day. Make sure you get your brats and burgers and everything, and hey, we'll be open all day for you to come back out. I haven't seen it so much in the automotive world, but I mean, as far as Juneteenth goes, but I still stand to the allegation that if we made voting day, election day a federal holiday, then your local Chevy dealership will be sitting out there, great election day prices, come on down, come on and buy your overpriced Chevrolet because it's election day. We've got an election day sale just like they do for Labor Day and Memorial Day. But yeah, the point that I was getting with Juneteenth is it's mostly affecting white upper middle class bankers and bank tellers, not the downtrodden community that it was used to buy votes for. But I think one of the better explanations that I've seen of this comes from Sarah Fields, who I have been following on and off on X for a while, and she's got good takes, she's got bad takes. I have seen some very, very bad takes come out of this account, but this one I thought kind of took it out of the park. Sarah Fields says, before the libs decide to create their own definition of what Juneteenth is, allow me to help you all out with a short history lesson. It's the day when black individuals found out that the first Republican president, in name only, by the way, habeas corpus, had signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing them from the physical bondage of the Democratic Party. It was 2 years later, on July 4th, 1867, that 150 of these same black men met in Houston and established the Republican Party of Texas. The Democrats, in response, established the Klan. I'm going to skip the first two words in that one just because of YouTube censors. Today, the Democrats are economically enslaving blacks and have turned the inner city communities into modern plantations of welfare and economic dependence. That, my opinions on that I'm going to save for a Rumble exclusive. Because I know that's not going to fly on YouTube. I know for a fact that's not going to fly there. Juneteenth is a celebration of why the Republican Party was established in 1854 with the abolition of slavery. Only a flaming, incompetent idiot would give the party of the donkey any credit for Juneteenth. Hope this helps. So, that is what Sarah Fields has to say about that. Let me get the chatter up here, the live chatter. It's like a couple people are starting to scroll in, take care of, and show up. But let's get down into our finance for the morning. Alright, oops, I'm still on the news page. Let's get onto the main Dow page. On the Dow today, the Dow closed yesterday, taking a very, very sharp loss at the end of the day while staying up for most of the rest of the day. And they're talking about the fact that a big part of this is that the Fed is not cutting rates this coming time. And now people are starting to question whether it's actually to try to fend off inflation or if it is because they want a certain political outcome and they don't want the jobs to be created, the people to take the risk and take out the loan. I don't know which way it's going, but we will talk a bit about that in our finance section. And well, I've got two dedicated articles to the rate cut and the non-rate cut that go with this. Let's throw a refresh on this one here. And let's see if, yeah, IBD has come up with a little bit closer one. I've got a CNBC article, but it is from late last night when everything was closing. And they paywalled it anyway. Tell with them then. Alright, let's talk from CNBC then instead. Dow post narrow loss after Fed signals it's in no hurry to cut rates, from Sean Conlin. The Dow ended Wednesday modestly lower following the Federal Reserve's latest policy update when the central bank kept interest rates steady and Jerome Powell signaled it would wait and see the impact of President Trump's tariffs on inflation before proceeding on rates. The 30-stock Dow lost 44.14 points, or 0.10%, and ended at 42,171.66. The S&P slipped 0.03 to close at 59,80.87, and the Nasdaq inched up 0.13 to settle at 19,546.27. The Fed left its key rate unchanged Wednesday in a range of 4.25 to 4.5, as markets expected. Nevertheless, it turned out to be a mixed bag of news for investors as the central bank still signaled 2 rate cuts this year, while simultaneously hinting at a stagflationary threat. The policymakers lowered the 2025 forecast for economic growth at just 1.4% and raised the core inflation outlook to 3.1%. While Powell said in a press conference following the decision that we're beginning to see some effects of tariffs on inflation, he also said that the policymakers are well positioned to wait before making any adjustments to rates. The size of the tariff effect, their duration, and the time it will take are all highly uncertain, Powell said, and that is why we think the appropriate thing to do is to hold where we are to learn more. Also on the oil front, the Israel-Iran conflict. Trump told reporters outside the White House Wednesday the Iranians had reached out and signaled they would like to send a delegation to Washington for negotiations. Well, that would be interesting, and that would change the next probably hour of content that I have planned here. Trump told reporters outside the White House I read that one already. They want to negotiate. They even suggested they come to the White House. That's courageous. It's not easy for them to do. Stocks were downbeat earlier this week as the conflict between Israel and Iran mounted, raising oil prices. And I'm sure that you saw that as you were going to the gas pump, where we went from, I know where I live, $2.79 to $3.09, pretty much overnight. The attacks between the two countries entered their 6th day Wednesday as Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, not the same one that was in Back to the Future 2, by the way, said that Iran won't surrender and warned the U.S. will undoubtedly be met with irreparable damage if it enters the conflict. Yeah, Japan promised us that too in 1941, and it took them longer to rebuild than it took us. And even that wasn't irreparable, by the way. The market just seems keen to fade geopolitical risk, Zachary Hill, head of portfolio management at Horizon Investments, said to CNBC. That has been historically the right thing to do. So I think that's kind of what's driving us so far today. So that is where we sit on that. Don't really have a whole lot of indication on futures right now. We'll see what happens with that and where that goes. The markets are not opening today, by the way, because of the fact that it is a bank holiday. So we will have no trade in the US today. Let's go ahead and grab one from Fox Business, talking about, a bit more about the interest rates. I'm going to change a couple things over here just so I can see who's showing up and who is hanging out and where, by the way. From Fox Business, Federal Reserve leaves key interest rate unchanged for the 4th straight meeting. The Federal Reserve on Wednesday said it will leave the benchmark interest rate unchanged following its June monetary policy meeting as policymakers continue to monitor inflation and labor market data amid elevated economic uncertainty. The central bank's decision leaves the benchmark federal funds rate at a range of 4.25% to 4.5%. It comes after the Fed left rates at this level in its three prior meetings in January, March, and May. The central bank cut rates for the first 3 meetings last year, which involved a 50 basis point cut in September and a pair of 25-point reductions in November and December, which, by the way, tells me that there's a little bit of politics going on with this. The Federal Open Market Committee, which guides the central bank's monetary policy moves, noted in its announcement that although swings in net exports have affected the data, recent indicators suggest economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. The unemployment rate remains low and labor market conditions remain solid. Inflation remains somewhat elevated, the FOMC statement noted. Policymakers added that uncertainty about economic outlook has diminished but remains elevated, and the Fed is attentive to the risks of both sides of its dual mandate, which is to pursue maximum employment and stable prices with long-run inflation at 2%. FOMC policymakers also released a summary of economic projections known as the so-called dot plot, which showed members see 2 interest rate cuts in 2025, followed by 1 cut each in 26 and 27. They also project that PC inflation will rise to 3% this year before declining to 2.4% in 26 and 2.1% the following year. Real GDP is seen as slowing to 1.4% in 25 before growth picks up to 1.6% next year and 1.8% in 2027. Unemployment is seen as rising to 4.5% in 2025 and 2026 before dipping to 4.4% in 2027. I'm a little bit curious as to where they're getting some of these numbers here, because we're seeing, especially the PCE rising before dropping again. And I do think that a part of that has a bit to do with what they're trying to say that tariffs are going to do, which I know a lot of the people who are involved in this segment of things are terrified of tariffs because they think it's going to hit their bottom line, or, you know, they might actually have to pay for labor or something else like that. Jerome Powell said in remarks during a post-announcement press conference that despite elevated uncertainty, the economy is in a solid position as the unemployment rate remains low and the labor market is at or near maximum employment. Inflation has come down a great deal, but has been running somewhat above our 2% longer run objective, which that in and of itself is understandable, and I get where they're coming from with that. Because I would actually like to see, after the 4 years that we had otherwise, I would very, very much like to see a few quarters of negative inflation, if it's indeed possible. So that is where we have with that. Somebody just messaged me saying that she's watching my stream, but I think that this might be a bot, maybe? I'm not sure. Because typically you would put the message in a comment on the live stream, not over on the Discord. Oh yeah, that person just joined my Discord as well, so. Yeah, comment in the live chat if you're a real person. I'm like, hey, where's all this coming from? Alright. He added the Fed's current stance on monetary policy leaves us well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments. So, and again, I've got some concerns about this. there are a lot of MAGA and Trumper people out there who are going to look at this and say this is entirely political and there's no other agenda, there's nothing else, and Powell's ruining the economy because he's a swamp creature and this and that and the next thing. I lean that direction myself, but I look at the situation that we're in. I look at where we are going to go and what's going to happen if we drop that interest rate too fast. Not necessarily in the business market. I think it would be great for the business market and the jobs market, but the cost that comes with that is it's going to explode the housing market. And I mean, that would be fantastic for me because, you know, then I would have even more equity in this house than I already have. And I started off a little bit. I started off in the positive as far as equity goes in this house. Thank God. It wasn't by much. A couple grand maybe. But I started off in a good position in this house. But with that having been said, I mean, if the same 70 million people start fighting over the same 1,000 houses, then yeah, the rest of our houses are going to go up in value. And that's going to be great for guys like me who just bought at the top of the interest rate. But the other side of that goes on to be, it's going to put a lot of other people out of the market, and yes, it's going to drive the rental rates back up too. So there are two different ways that we can go and look at this and understand. I do understand that there should be still some caution with the Federal Reserve. This is coming from somebody who hates the Federal Reserve, but I understand where there should be some caution with it as well. So we'll continue to watch this particular situation and see where it goes. I do think that it's mostly political. I do think that the Fed doesn't want to see a successful job market coming up in the next 3 years. They want to see a stagnation. They don't want to see people go into the poorhouse, but they kind of just want to see people steady along and not really get ahead anywhere, so that when the next Democratic president comes along, they can say, oh, hey, look, we lowered the interest rates and we saved the economy, and look at how great this president is. I think there's a level to that as well. We'll skip the NPR one. We'll have plenty of chance to do NPR voice on this one. And we're going to start then in our main news, the title card of this particular program, from the Daily Wire. I don't usually start from the Daily Wire. That's usually the commentary towards the end of what we're talking about. But we're going to start with this one, just because they made it really, really easy to find the initial news. Now everybody, all the other mainstream outlets are saying, oh, well, this has happened, and look, this is all from 3 hours ago, and you get 17 pages in before you see something from a day ago. So we just go down the Daily Wire. From the Daily Wire, Israel strikes Iran. I saw somebody already post on X, if you pronounce it Iran, I can't take you seriously. I don't care if you take me seriously or not. This is from Cassie Akiba. The Israeli Air Force struck Iran on Thursday night with explosions heard in Tehran. It's unclear which targets Israel struck. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz, that's a pretty fitting name for someone from Israel who's defending Israel. Do you think he's defending Israel, or do you think he's defending Israel? Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz declared a special situation throughout Israel for the next 48 hours. This article, of course, coming out on June 12th, so about 7 days ago. Due to a high probability that a retaliatory attack would occur. Before the strikes, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee tweeted that he would remain at the embassy all night. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, Huckabee said, responding to a tweet from State Department encouraging American citizens in Israel and the surrounding region to be cautious. And again, this is from 7 days ago, because now we're in the full-out get everybody out mode. Huckabee tweets, at our embassy in Jerusalem and closely following the situation, we will remain here all night. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Quote Xing a State Department X that says, due to the high tensions in the Middle East, the security environments remain complex and can change quickly. We remind U.S. citizens in Israel and the broader region of the continued need for caution and encourage them to monitor the news for breaking developments. I do not know who Mike Huckabee has with him right now, as far as his family goes, and as far as the family of the diplomats that are working with him. If it was me, and I'm going to be, speculation, of course, in hindsight as well, 7 days out from this particular article and this particular X, I would say, honestly, if it was me, I would stick behind. But my family would be on the next plane to Europe to get on an airliner to get across the ocean. I don't care if that plane is a 2-seat, 3-seat, or whatever it is, crop duster. They'd be on the next plane going out to somewhere allied in Europe. And then we'll figure out who gets on and how they get on the Boeing in London or Paris or wherever the hell. That's how I would do it if it was me. Earlier on Thursday, Trump said an Israeli attack was something that could very well happen, but he said he preferred a diplomatic approach to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon because, of course, this entire thing boils down to whether or not Iran has a nuclear weapon. Just like it has since 1995. We have been doing this for officially 30 years. Happy anniversary, by the way. Allegations of Iran having a nuclear weapon, or being able to get a nuclear weapon, or just days away from getting a nuclear weapon. Happy anniversary, happy anniversary. Well, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Also from The Wire, Iran strikes Tel Aviv multiple times. Israel expected to retaliate on Iranian infrastructure. So, yes, and this is from the 13th. So, we've basically been going back and forth on this for 7 days. From Cassia Kiba. Iran struck Tel Aviv multiple times on Friday night in its 3 missile barrages, which resulted in damage to buildings and 1 confirmed death, along with dozens of injuries. Iran's attack on the densely populated Israeli city comes after a senior security official told Israel's Channel 12 that it would target Iran's leaders and state infrastructure such as oil refineries if population centers were struck. So far, Israel's attacks on Iran have primarily targeted nuclear and weapons sites, as well as locations with top military generals or nuclear scientists present. Iran's 2 first barrages resulted in over 30 injuries. From minor to fatal, the impact of the 3rd barrage remains unclear as search and rescue teams continue operations at the sites where projectiles landed. Images from the strikes in Tel Aviv show buildings severely damaged by the missiles. The Israel Defense Forces said that Iran fired fewer than 100 missiles in the first 2 barrages, and dozens of missiles in the 2nd barrage. The United States, Jordan, and Israel participated in shooting down the Iranian missiles. I want to talk just a bit about Iran's tactics on this, because it is something that they've done numerous times. Because, obviously, this is not the first time these 2 countries have gone boom, 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 pew, 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 back and forth with each other. This has been going, realistically, depending on how you want to come back and cover it, this has been going on since Abraham was walking around. This has been going on for like 6,000 years at this point. But in the most recent spat, going back to the 40s and 50s, it's with the Iron Dome system in place. What Iran and Syria and Lebanon like to do is they like to go back and they like to launch a bunch of rockets, and maybe some of them actually have a warhead on it. But the majority of them don't, because they want to go back and have Israel go back and spend their load on blank munitions. Use up those Iron Dome munitions on stuff that's not going to take them down, and they'll hold back probably the ones that have the payload until they're somewhat certain that all the Iron Dome stuff has been spent. And I don't know, because I don't know enough about the Iron Dome system to know how rapid fire it is, if there needs to be a manual person loading it, how fast they can go back and reload it, how many munitions they have in reserve for that. I'm sure it's a lot. And then, of course, now the U.S. and Jordan as well have joined in on looks like air superiority to try to keep some of this off of the civilian population of Tel Aviv as well. A senior official told Axios that the U.S. has acted to protect the hundreds of thousands of American citizens in Israel and other American assets in Israel. Israel has killed 7 high-ranking Iranian military officials, including the Chief of General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Mohammad Bagheri, Commander-in-Chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Hossein Salami. I wonder if he is related to Swami Salami? Let's see. Commander of the Qatam Al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, Gholam al-Rashid. Commander of the IRGC Aerospace Forces, Amir Ali Hajizadeh. I am probably butchering these names. IRGC Air Defense Commander Davoud Shakian. Senior Advisor to Iran Supreme Leader Ali Shamkhani, and Deputy Chief of Staff to the Iranian Army Mehdi Rabbani. Senior State Department official McCoy Pitt told the UN Security Council today that Israel's strike on Iran was necessary for its self-defense. Every sovereign nation has the right to defend itself, and Israel is no exception, he said. President Trump's elected with a sweeping mandate from the American people to advance the peace and avoid the grave mistakes of the past administrations that led to forever wars. Which is weird because this really feels like the rhetoric that got us into the last forever war. And it's actually oddly similar to the rhetoric that got us into the forever war before that. And oddly enough, it's somewhat similar to the rhetoric that got us into the forever war before that. He added that the U.S. will continue to seek a diplomatic resolution that ensures Iran will never acquire a nuclear weapon or pose a threat to stability in the Middle East, and that Iran's leadership would be wise to negotiate at this time. And that's where I'm starting to draw an issue with this. Now, I'm not thrilled about the idea of the IRGC having a nuclear weapon, but I sleep somewhat calmly at night knowing the fact that they can have all the nuclear warheads that they want. They're never going to get over here, dude. Iran has very good drone technology. They do. I'm not going to argue against that. That's been one of the things that's been used in the Ukrainian war and has held the tide at a basic stalemate for, well, 5 years at this point. And they've been fueling and feeding other conflicts around the world as well. Iran has great drone technology, but intercontinental technology, I don't see any evidence of any of them having any of that. But I question why it is our responsibility to world police. Shipping lanes, I can understand. Because a lot of our product goes with a lot of our citizens around the world in these shipping lanes, going from the Suez Canal, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific, the Atlantic. So yes, having a beefy naval force just to make sure that our ships stay afloat is one thing. But then, yeah, now having to go back in and boots on the ground in various other theaters, I don't understand why it's our responsibility. I mean, Europe is right there. I would say probably don't leave that to Russia because Iran and Russia have had a tenuous alliance since the 80s. Russia and Afghanistan have had a tenuous alliance since the 80s. But Europe and NATO are like literally right there. Can they do something about this? If this, I mean, they've got a better interest for this. There may not be an intercontinental ballistic missile, but there's road paths that they can put a warhead in a truck and drop that thing in the middle of Munich. I can see where they might actually have a vested interest in something like this. But that is where the Daily Wire is at off this one, and I'm actually a little bit curious as to what side you think that Ben Shapiro takes in this particular conflict. That was sarcasm, of course. All right, moving off of the Daily Wire, moving on to the Associated Press. Intense Israeli strikes hit Tehran after Trump demands unconditional surrender. This is a little bit more recent. Coming from yesterday, actually. 2 days ago at this point. Intense Israeli strikes targeted Iran's capital early Wednesday after U.S. President Trump demanded an unconditional surrender. As the U.S. sent warplanes to the Middle East, Trump made a series of statements about the conflict, including warning Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei that the U.S. knows where he's hiding, but there were no plans to kill him, at least not for now. His statements fueled confusion about the U.S.'s role in the conflict as Tehran residents flee their homes on the 6th day of Israel's air campaign aimed at Iran's military and nuclear program. Israel asserts its sweeping assault is necessary to prevent Iran from getting any closer to building an atomic weapon. The strikes have killed at least 224 people in Iran. We're going to talk a bit about the revolution that's sitting precariously close in Iran as well. Because I think that's an interesting side of this entire thing. Iran has retaliated by launching some 400 missiles and hundreds of drones at Israel. So far, 24 people have been killed in Israel. The conflict erupted as Israel continues to fight in the Gaza Strip, where they have been near daily shootings since last week, near hubs where desperate Palestinians are being directed to collect food. The AP is already tugging at the heartstrings on this one. A major explosion could be heard around 5 a.m. in Tehran on Wednesday morning, following other explosions that boomed earlier in the pre-dawn darkness. Authorities in Iran offered no acknowledgement of the attacks, which have become increasingly common as the Israeli airstrike campaign has intensified since they began on Friday. At least one strike appeared to target Tehran's eastern neighborhood of Hakimayeh, where paramilitary Revolutionary Guard has an academy. The Israelis earlier warned they could strike a neighborhood south of Mehrabad International Airport, which includes residential neighborhoods, military installations, pharmaceutical companies, and industrial firms. And that's one of the things that I kind of don't like about military in general and the fact of where it is that they put things. Now, we've got Fort McCoy here in Wisconsin. I know where it is. I've been by it. I've never set foot on the actual base itself, but it is semi-removed from the neighborhoods that it surrounds. Camp Douglas is the same way, just a little ways away from here. It's another situation where it's there, it exists, but it's far, far removed from the vast majority of civilization in Wisconsin. It's, surrounded by farmland. There are a couple little general stores and things close to there, but if somebody were to look at, if somebody from a foreign country were to get ballsy enough to come back out and say, hey, you know what? Those guys, that battalion that came from Camp David, they really made me mad, and they got a bomber over and they got fire defenses somehow by some miracle and dropped a bomb on Camp David. We would lose maybe 1 or 2 civilians. Actually, probably a little bit more than that. It would depend on who's driving on the interstate at that time. But the number would be in the tens. It would not be in the hundreds on civilian side. You probably lose a lot of soldiers, but the civilian population would be largely unaffected at that point, because we keep our military bases in this country far, far away from civilization, for the most part. Whereas it seems in Gaza, they hide their military installations right among the civilians. In Iran, it seems that their military installations are, from what the AP is saying here, fairly close to civilian populaces. And I would say that, especially if these strikes are going right into the capital, Tehran, that Israel is probably a little bit guilty of that themselves, putting all of their military outpost installations and equipment somewhat close to civilians. Israel also claimed that it had killed Iran's General Ali Shadmani, whom Israel described as the country's most senior remaining military commander in Tehran. Yeah, but I'm sure that there's somebody else waiting in the wings, possibly a sergeant or something, that just suddenly became the general. They've got a little map here on the nuclear site to the north, which seems to be the contention point of all of this. Within the mountains, there are 2 enrichment halls, each with centrifuge cascades for a total capacity of 3,000 centrifuges. They've got tunnel entrances that go into there, a support building out to the outside, checkpoint, making sure that people that they don't want in there can't get in, and a nice big security perimeter there as well. Shadmani was little known in the country before being appointed last week to Chief of Staff-like role as the head of the paramilitary Revolutionary Guard Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, following the killing of his predecessor, General Gholam al-Rashid, in an Israeli strike. Trump left the G7 in Canada a day early to deal with the conflict between Israel and Iran, telling reporters, "I'm not looking at a ceasefire. We're looking at it better than a ceasefire," which, and we will be talking about the leaving a little bit separately. We won't go into big detail about that because, I mean, it's not a huge deal. Obviously, if you have assets in a country that's actively getting fired at by another country that your GOP peers all tell you is evil and chants death to America, then yeah, you're going to leave the conference. When asked to explain, he said, "The U.S. wanted to see a real end to the conflict that could involve Iran giving up entirely. I'm not too much in the mood to negotiate." But he also indicated that diplomatic talks remained an option and said that he could send VP Vance and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to meet with the Iranians. Meanwhile, the U.S. is shifting military aircraft and warships into and around the Middle East to protect Israel from Iranian attacks and respond to Iran's threats to target U.S. military installations, in which there are a bunch, by the way. It's a little bit ridiculous, the number of military installations that are within X amount of distance to this area. Yeah, by the way, I have no D-Live right now. It wouldn't come back and hook up. So, I hope that you're either watching on the replay or watching on Twitch if you're a regular D-Live watcher. Satellite images analyzed Wednesday by the Associated Press appear to show no vessels anchored off headquarters of the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet in Bahrain. Dispersing ships is a common safety technique employed by navies around the world in times of trouble. That's weird. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, and she speaks words of wisdom. Let it be. I can't believe I know that right off the top of my head. Trump and Netanyahu spoke about the evolving situation over the phone on Tuesday, according to a White House official who was not authorized to comment publicly and spoke on condition of anonymity. That's right! Anonymous sources. They're not just for Biden's cabinet anymore. And yes, Iran has vowed further attacks. In other news, water is wet. But I'm curious as to see just how long the political situation in Tehran and Iran broadly can survive on something like this. Alright. From the USA Today, we have a bit of a timeline. We'll go over this one here. Israel-Iran timeline. How an Israeli attack and Iranian retaliation unfolded. From Janet Lorky, Ramon Padilla, Sarah Chernikoff, and Stephen J. Beard. Iran and Israel continue to exchange strikes 6 days after their long-simmering conflict hit the flashpoint. Israel's surprise attack on Tehran's nuclear program, targeted assassination of Iranian leadership, kicked off a sequence of events that's left hundreds reported killed and the U.S. at risk of being dragged further into war. While being, by the way, cheered by several of the Bushites who do want to see us go into this war. Here's a closer look at what has unfolded since Israel's initial strikes. And they've got maps with us as well. You're not going to be able to see those on the audio platform, obviously. The maps below are based on assessments from the Critical Threats Project in the American Enterprise Institute and the Institute for Study of War. They include confirmed airstrikes, reported airstrikes, reports of explosions with footage, reports of explosions without footage, the data collected from sources including geolocated visual evidence and opposition, local and international media. USA Today conducted additional verification on some but not all strikes. So we've got the June 17th attacks and the previous attacks. And it looks like a lot of this obviously is being centered on Tehran. They're up in the northwest corner where the nuclear strike is, with a series of other strikes kind of dotting the western coast of Iran. They're leaving a lot of the eastern side of that, with the exception of Mashhad, a couple strikes over there. They're leaving the eastern half of the country for the most part alone. There isn't very much to the east of Tehran at this point. June 12th to 13th, Israel conducted the first strikes of an air campaign targeting Iran's nuclear program and leadership at 8 p.m. Eastern, according to the Critical Threats Project and American Enterprise Institute and the Institute for Study of War. I'm going to skip over the citations at this point. They are there, and you'll be able to see them on the video platform. And I can link this article in the description of the audio platform or put it up in the Discord as well. In fact, I'm going to go put it in the Discord right now, so you guys can go back and have a glance over at that one. There you go, do that. Go read that. You'll like it, I promise. The Israeli military conducted attacks targeting Iran's uranium enrichment facility in Natanz and hit additional targets at the heart of the Islamic Republic's nuclear and ballistic missiles programs. The surprise attacks killed nearly the entire top echelon of Iran's military commanders, Reuters reported. Netanyahu said that Iran's leading nuclear scientists were also targeted in the attacks. Iran launched 3 retaliatory waves of missiles at targets in Israel. So yeah, they ran just up the coast and a little bit off the coast in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and up to the north, going towards Syria. Bringing this in, Iran's nuclear facilities and weapons facilities. There are 6 weapons facilities within Tehran and 2 nuclear sites, because yes, of course, they're going to go back and hide those around civilians. And they've got nuclear sites dotted all along the desert and the rest of the country, including a little ways to the east of Tehran, so in places where they weren't getting targeted otherwise. They've got nuclear sites over there. But it looks like some of these do coincide with a lot of the strikes that were going on, and weapons facilities as well, although there's more nuclear sites than weapons facilities in the country, per the map from the USA Today. On June 14th, the Israeli military struck an unspecified underground weapons facility in western Iran. Iranian state media reported that Israel bombed multiple energy facilities in southern Iran. South Pars Field, the world's largest gas field, was struck along with Bajarjam gas plant. Iran's petroleum ministry confirmed that the Shahran depot was also targeted by Israel, Al Jazeera reported. June 15th, Israel and Iran continued to exchange airstrikes. ISW reported Israel also targeted Iranian government buildings, such as the Iranian Foreign Affairs Ministry in Tehran and the Ministry of Intelligence and Security. So trying to get some of those people disseminating information taken off the map. Iran sent hundreds of drones and missiles into Israel, damaging the country's largest oil refinery. Near the port city of Haifa and the Weizmann Institute of Science, which of course takes the global supply out and brings our oil prices up. The Weizmann Institute of Science, a top research center in the country, according to the Wall Street Journal. Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Yashil Leader, appeared on ABC News this week, where Martha Raddatz asked Leader to talk about Fordow fuel enrichment plant, suggesting Israel cannot destroy the site, located deep under a mountainside, without U.S. assistance in the form of bunker-busting bombs. Which I would kind of enjoy it if we didn't, do that. The Bunker Busters. They've got the GVU Bunker Buster, can penetrate 20 feet of concrete or 100 feet of rock and dirt. The MOP can penetrate nearly anything, even reinforced concrete and armored steel. And then, of course, we also have the MOAB, Mother of All Bombs. An Israeli strike hit Iran. This is June 16th, by the way. An Israeli strike hit Iran state broadcaster on Monday, June 16th, and bombed a command center for an elite Iranian military unit. The same day, Israel hit Iranian F-14 fighter planes at the Tehran airport. Rafael Grossi, head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, told the BBC it's very likely that roughly 15,000 centrifuges operating at Iran's biggest uranium enrichment power plant at Natanz were badly damaged or destroyed because of a power cut caused by an Israeli strike. In a social media post, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced the deployment of additional capabilities to the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. The Washington Post, citing a flight tracking data, reports that more than 24 tanker planes were deployed from the U.S. to Europe on Sunday and Monday, possibly trying to take up some of the slack from the Middle East right now. Because I'm sure, especially given the fact that this airstrike goes directly across the trade route coming from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE going into Europe. The Pentagon has shifted warplanes and aircraft carriers to the Middle East as the conflict between Israel and Iran continues to rage, but the moves have been defensive in nature as the U.S. observes rather than participates in Israel's punishing air campaign, according to U.S. officials. Massive lines of traffic were seen in the Iranian capital after a social media post from President Trump. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. This is part of the reason I don't want to live anywhere close to a capital. Get ourselves a nice little drink going on here. Energy drink from the company I very much enjoy and tweeted at the other day. And if that particular company was paying me, it would be in their vessel, with the C name facing towards the camera. But they're not paying me. June 17th, Israel hit Iranian cities with bombs, and some Iranian missiles invaded Israel's Iron Dome defense system. Satellite images captured by Maxar technology show extensive damage to several Iranian military facilities. At Tabriz, multiple storage buildings, roads, and tunnels were damaged. A destroyed Iranian tanker aircraft was seen at Mashhad Airport. By the way, if you enjoy Fallout, it might be time to go back and boot that back up right about now. I'm just saying. Might be a good idea. Hey, Luke Wee is here. Luke Wee got to catch me live. We've got a message on Discord at some point, Luke Wee. I have something to tell you about where I live now. But that's not for general public. So we've got the Tabriz facility. We've got the Mashhad airport with the damage to the runway. Israel's National Security Advisor, Sachi Hanegbi, offered the clearest signal yet about the goals of Israel's air campaign, telling local Channel 12 the news on June 17th the military is going after the hardest hit target in Iran, the Fordo nuclear enrichment plant. This operation will not conclude without a strike on the Fordo nuclear facility, Hanegbi said. On the 18th, yesterday, the ongoing aerial war between Israel and Iran entered its 6th day. More than 220 Iranians have been killed and at least 1,200 injured since the bombardment began. Iranian state media reported 24 Israelis have been killed in Iranian missile attacks, officials said. And again, that's part of the fact of military assets are, I believe, somewhat away from civilians in Israel, and Iron Dome is contributing to that as well, versus Iran hiding their military facilities among civilians. So lots of stuff going on there. Lots of stuff going on here. But there's our timeline. That is in the Discord if you would prefer. If you'd like to go back and have a look at that yourself. And also check the citations, because I skipped over that. Another one from The Wire. We'll go briefly over this as promised. Trump leaves G7 early over what's going on in the Middle East. White House says. From Tim Pierce. President Trump plans to leave the economic summit of world leaders early because of the conflicts in the Middle East. White House press secretary, bubble-headed bleach blonde, said in a post on X on Monday that Trump had planned to stay in the economic summit longer, but will return to Washington Monday night because of what's going on in the Middle East. Trump left D.C. for Canada this week to meet with world leaders at the Group of Seven Summit. I'm a little bit surprised he's actually invited to that. I mean, the U.S. is the piggy bank for the rest of these countries, don't get me wrong, but given our political situation around the world and the fact that all of our world leaders are laughing at the U.S. right now, it still surprises me a little bit that he's invited to this. Bubble-headed bleach blonde continues. President Trump had a great day at G7, even signing a major trade deal with the UK and Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Much was accomplished, but because of what's going on in the Middle East, President Trump will be leaving tonight after dinner with the heads of state. The change in the president's plans came as he posted a warning to residents in Tehran to leave the city immediately. The Iranian capital has been bombarded for days by Israel and targeted strikes on military and other key locations. So, that's what we have with that. Earlier Monday, the president confirmed Iran has reached out through intermediaries to negotiate the end of the conflict. They'd like to talk, but they should have done that before, the president told reporters at the summit. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days. On the 61st day, Trump created war. No, that's not what he said. On the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal. And it's not painful. And it's painful for both parties. But I'd say Iran is not winning this war. And they should talk. And they should talk immediately before it's too late. So yeah, he's out of there. He's going back to figure out what's going on in the world. He's in the Situation Room. Apparently Tulsi's in the Situation Room with him. From CBS News, Trump says no decision yet on U.S. joining Israel's attacks in Iran after Iran warns it would risk an all-out war. Because of course they would. From Deborah Pata and Tucker Reels. President Trump said Wednesday that he had not yet decided whether the U.S. military will join Israel's ongoing attacks on Iran. And he didn't believe it was too late to reach a deal with the Islamic Republic on its nuclear program, though he warned it was very late to be talking. I may do it. I may not do it. Nobody knows what I'm going to do, Trump told reporters when he was asked about the U.S. taking part in the strikes in Iran's nuclear and military facilities. The president told reporters later Wednesday in the Oval Office that while some don't want the U.S. to become involved, it's possible that you're going to have to fight for them not to have nuclear. Nuclear. It's like China. But there's no way that you can allow, whether you have to fight or not, you can allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon because the entire world will blow up. And then I get to play my favorite video game in real life. Not gonna let that happen. Iran has readied missiles and equipment for strikes on U.S. bases in the region if the U.S. joins Israel's war effort against Iran, according to a senior U.S. intelligence official and a Pentagon official briefed on the matter. Asked if he believed it was too late to negotiate a new deal to curb Iran's nuclear program, which he has made clear he wants the Iranian government to abandon completely, Mr. Trump said, "Nothing is too late." Mr. Trump said the Iranians had sought talks and said they'd even suggested sending a delegation for discussions at the White House. So, one of the things to say about this, and like CBS is not going to talk about this for even a second at this point, but one of the things that's important to talk about here is strategy when we talk about something like this. Now, and I realize the same decision would have gone from all three men that I'm about to describe, and almost certainly the two women I'm about to describe, but the answer would be yes, all in, but also on the fact, the fact of reality is you would know. They wouldn't try to hide it. They wouldn't come back and put that as a negotiating chip on the table. But HW, W, Biden, Obama, and yes, Hillary, Kamala, Jeb, if he would have made it all the way through, Joe Walsh, if God forbid he would have made it through trying to primary Trump in 2020. Think people like that, they would be on the stage telling you exactly what it is that we're going to do. George W. Bush would be up there. Yeah, we can't let that Iran get them nuclear weapons, man. So Dick Cheney and I are going to come back out here and we're going to send everybody in. We're going all in on war on this one. Barack Obama. Yep, man. It's nuclear weapons. They're bad. Nuclear power's bad. We're just going. We're going to do this. We're going to take care of this. Bring our military. Joe Biden the same. Hey, come on, man. Jill! Are we supposed to be going to Iran or not, man? Okay. But yes, their positions would be well known. And one of the things, it's hard for me to sit here because I'm sitting here terrified over the fact that we are going to wind up going into war at this point. As I said at the top of the segment, my first position is always anti-war, especially with U.S. involved. If Iran and Israel want to go back and kill each other until there is not one single soldier left, that's on them. If Russia and the Ukraine want to go back and sit and kill each other till there's not one single soldier left, that's between the two of them. I don't see the U.S. being necessary to get involved in any of this. Now, if somebody is stupid enough to go back and launch a strike and try to take over this country, then yes, we'll go ahead and let our boys in camouflage go back and light those, excuse my language, which I'm not going to say it, but light those guys up. And if for whatever reason they get past our boys in camo, they will run into a bunch of angry rednecks with guns. Typically because they'll be coming on the Atlantic side, so they're not going to make it through the Appalachians. And if, for God forbid, they do, what do you think is going to happen when you get to the Mississippi River Valley or Texas? Trust me, invading the U.S. is not going to turn out well for you. But with that being said, what I do understand is that by saying, yeah, we might be able to go in, we might not. I don't believe, based on the actions of the first term of Trump, that he has an interest or a desire to go to war. I could be very, very wrong and proven very wrong on this, by the way, and I will admit to the audience, I will make a separate video admitting to the audience that I was wrong about that. It's entirely possible that I can be wrong about that. I'm not going to hide from that fact. I don't believe he wants to go in, but to come back out and say that basically gives Iran and Israel full impunity to go back and forth with each other without any fear of consequence from the country that's got bigger nukes, bigger fighter jets, more ammunition, and more fighters than either one of them combined. And it's the same thing to go back and say, go all in, because then Iran's got all the propaganda that it needs, that the U.S. is funding Israel, and hey, Qatar, come back out and come help us, because the great Satan, the United States, is going back. And being ambiguous about this is the best thing that the Trump administration can do right now. Not even letting their own citizens know what it is that he intends to do. And yes, that's going to make a lot of the libertarian people mad. It is. I bet you that if I X the same thing and tagged my former co-host, Libertarian Red One, over on X and said, hey, the ambiguity is the important part, I would get a 70-tweet lecture on why I was wrong and how I became a warmonger since she left the show. Grab one from Axios. Axios with the speculation the U.S. could join Israel's war with Iran to deploy this 30,000-pound bomb. A 30,000-pound bomb might be the most important weapon for Israel's war with Iran, and it's in the U.S. military's hands. The U.S. alone possesses the world's most powerful non-nuclear bomb and is uniquely capable of targeting key Iranian facilities that Israel can't hit with its own weapons. The bomb in question is 30,000 pounds and precision-guided. The GBU-57AB Massive Ordnance Penetrator, also known as the MOP. In 2015, the U.S. Air Force said the MOP was designed to accomplish a difficult and complicated mission of reaching and destroying adversaries' weapons of mass destruction located in well-protected facilities. So, yeah, that whole crap lie that we were told about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's also known as a bunker buster. And bunker busting is exactly what Israel's aim is. Iran's Fortress is built into a mountain and hundreds of feet underground, the kind of fortress the MOP was designed to penetrate. Penetrate. Giggity. If the facility remains accessible and intact, Iran's nuclear program, which Israel is determined to eliminate, could actually accelerate. Axios calling for war. The entire operation really has to be completed with the elimination of Fortress, Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Yeshel Leader told Fox News on Friday. So, Axios is saying, hey, we could go back and drop the mother of all bombs on Fortress and then it'll all be over. Alright, what else do we have here? Let's see. From disclosed, Israeli officials say Trump approved the Iran attack. Way to clear U.S. green light. Adding reports of Trump restraining Israel were planted to deceive while Trump and Netanyahu coordinated the attack in private, per Axios. I don't know how much of that I believe, especially based on the reactions that we've had over the past couple days. And I was not able to find any confirmation of that one as well. Alright, what else do we have? From the Associated Press, Iran's leader rejects calls to surrender and warns that intervention would harm the U.S. From Joseph Krauss, John Gambrell, and Julia Frankel. Oh, frankly, Iran's supreme leader rejected U.S. calls for surrender in the face of more Israeli strikes Wednesday and warned that any military involvement by the Americans would cause irreparable damage to them. European diplomats prepared to hold talks with Iran on Friday. It's kind of entertaining to me because Iran also came out and said that they were going to do something on Wednesday night that the entire Wednesday night their time that the entire world will remember for centuries to come. And well, apparently I missed that because I have no idea what it is that it was. The second public appearance by Ayatollah Khomeini since the Israeli strikes began 6 days ago came as Israel lifted some restrictions on daily life, suggesting that the missile threat from Iran is easing. Khomeini spoke a day after Trump demanded in a social media post that Iran surrender without conditions and warned Khomeini the U.S. knows where he is, but has no plans to kill him, at least not for now. Trump initially distanced himself from Israel's surprise attack aimed at Iran's nuclear program, but in recent days he's hinted at greater American involvement, saying he wants something much bigger than a ceasefire. The U.S. has also sent more military aircraft and warships into the region. I think I know what the bigger thing that he wants is. And honestly, I would probably come out and say that I think we're looking at possibly a regime change and revolution, which is something else I don't really support. Yeah, we'll be talking about that later because the military is back on. Or, I'm sorry, the internet is back on over there. Thanks to evil Elon Musk, actually. You know, that guy that never does anything that doesn't benefit himself. We'll grab one briefly from our friends over at NPR. Israeli president calls on the world to help destroy Iran nuclear sites. Yes, that's right. They don't just want to drag the U.S. into it, they want to drag all of Europe and Russia and everybody else in to go turn their sights on one small country that is admittedly artificially back in the Stone Age based on the current leadership of this. And do we want to see how this can be turned as Republican bad? Well, we are at the right site, so hit that donate button, because NPR will tell you how you can be in favor of war and still blame Republicans for everything as long as you hit that donate button, because they are only 10% government funded. So, remember, NPR is a never printing reality. National Progressive Radio. Let's see what it is that they have to say. It's kind of weird talking NPR voice over that funky bass line, doing Dire Dire Docks from Super Mario 64, but it was kind of fun too. Israel's... Oh, Jesus. The House has voted yes to defunding public radio. It'll never get past the Senate, but donate more, please. Save public media. Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, told NPR that his country would welcome international support in its war to eradicate Iran's nuclear program, which Israel says was on the threshold of building atomic weapons. Which, again, they've been saying that since 1995. The president, who holds a largely ceremonial role in Israel, spoke to NPR in his official residence in Jerusalem as President Trump was still weighing whether to intervene, possibly authorizing B-2 bombers with bunker-busting bombs to take out Iran's most heavily fortified nuclear sites. Say that 5 times fast. B-2 bombers with bunker-busting bombs. Weapons which Israel does not possess. I mean, B-2 bombers with bunker-busting bombs sounds like something that would come out of a razor fist skit. I'm telling you right now, we're going to go drop and authorize a B-2 bomber with bunker-busting bombs on everything else that we can... And again, I'm trying to keep the language clean because you might have kids in the car. Trump had earlier demanded an unconditional surrender from Iran, which he meant. I've had it. Okay, I've had it. I give up. No more. Then we go blow up all the, you know, all the nuclear stuff that's over there. While Israel has not publicly called on the U.S. to join its offensive against Iran. They wrote that with a straight face. Oh, jeez. Oh, I gotta take my hat off for that one. Israel has not publicly requested the U.S. to join its offensive. Really? Because I read 3 articles previously that said they have. Oh, jeez. Herzog said intervention from nations would certainly be welcomed. Yeah, okay. I didn't directly ask, but I would welcome it if you did it. Jeez. There's a bigger picture here that the world and the American people should understand, he said, speaking just hours before Iran fired another missile barrage at Israel, which it's done repeatedly since Israel began attacking Iran last Friday. We have to stop this empire of evil no more. This sounds like the rhetoric that brought us into World War II. And tell them, get the gosh darn nukes out of your hands and start behaving in a decent way, and not be the rogue state you're all over the world. It's impossible. Herzog said. So, I haven't directly asked people to help us, but come on and help us. The BBC has got some questions answered here. Your questions answered on the Israel-Iran conflict. Should I read this all in a British accent? Would that be a fun thing to do from the BBC the entire way? I could sound like a good little boy from Liverpool. I might be able to do some Cockney. If possible. No, I can't do that one. I don't know that one enough to do it. Iran and Israel continued to attack each other Wednesday. As the president said, I may do it, I may not do it, when asked whether the U.S. would join the conflict. Alright, why is Israel bombing Iran now? Israel's position on this is that it had no choice, that it believes that the last few months Iran was accelerating towards building a nuclear weapon, and that talks aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear program were going nowhere, and that therefore this was a last resort. They said they see an existential threat from Iran, having argued that if Iran acquired a nuclear weapon, it would use it because it had previously vowed to destroy the state of Israel. Like I said, Persia started doing that 6,000 years ago. And Rome and the Soviet Union have done more to destroy the state of Israel than Iran has, or Persia has in the last 6,000 years. That Iran was close to building a nuclear weapon was not necessarily a view shared by the rest of the region, and it's not necessarily shared by the International Atomic Energy Agency, nor is it shared by the last open source report we have seen from the U.S. intelligence, which did not say Iran was about to produce a nuclear weapon. Where can civilians go? The IDF has issued some evacuation notices for certain parts of the capital, Tehran. We've seen footage of huge traffic jams of lines of cars trying to escape Tehran. But there have been strikes on those areas as well because targets have been so widespread that no area is considered safe. In Tehran, the government announced they were opening the metro stations 24 hours a day so people can take shelter. So it's going to be exactly like Fallout. Terrific. Tehran has 10 million people, so you can imagine evacuating a number of people is not really possible. If the U.S. enters the conflict, would Iran strike U.S. targets? Not on this continent, they won't. They might hit somewhere in Saudi Arabia or Iraq or the UAE, possibly Turkey. But they won't do it on this continent, I can tell you that. Could Iran's proxy support it in conflict with Israel? Since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, Israel has systemically taken down a lot of the first-line defense that Iran had. The Houthis are constrained in Yemen, But, you know, there's also Russia and Afghanistan with our military power. China could possibly get into this one. So this is not just a matter of all the terror groups that the IRGC funds. This is a matter of actual geopolitical conflict. Who is Iran's leader? Ali Khamenei. He doesn't command the support of all of Iran. Yeah, we'll talk about that. What happens if the regime is overthrown in Iran? Well, somebody else is going to come in and fill the power vacuum. Just like what happens every other time a regime gets toppled. Whereas Fordo, that's in the northwest corner of Iran. We know that one already. How close is Iran to getting a nuclear bomb? Nobody knows. Does Israel have nuclear weapons? Yes. There you go. There's all your questions answered about the conflict over there, with some of the stuff from the BBC and some of the stuff me coming out and saying the actual story. NPR also saying that Israel and the U.S. intelligence differ on the status of Iran's nuclear program. Who's right? Let's read briefly on this one. I'm going to say somewhere in the middle and say nobody's actually right. Because a lot of this is just propaganda, meant to keep us on a war footing. Netanyahu has argued for decades that Iran was on the verge of producing a nuclear weapon. And he ordered the attack on Iran because he believed Tehran was marching very quickly towards a bomb. The intel we got and we shared with the US was absolutely clear that they were working on, in a secret plan, to weaponize the uranium. Netanyahu said in an interview with Fox News. However, U.S. intelligence community has long had somewhat different interpretation. The Americans say Iran suspended its nuclear weapons program in 2003, shortly after the U.S. invaded Iraq. Tulsi Gabbard reiterated the U.S. position in a testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee on March 25th. However, Trump has now contradicted Gabbard. I don't care what she said. I think they're very close to having it. So what to make of these competing claims? In short, we don't know. That's what to make of these competing claims. We have no idea. And I think it's time for more people to come back and accept the fact that we have absolutely no idea. We really do. The UN's nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, says Iran has now accumulated a little bit over 900 pounds of uranium-235, enriched to a 60% purity. For comparison, uranium enriched to 5% can be used to run a civilian nuclear power plant, and 90% enrichment is considered weapons grade. To go from 60 to 9 can be done quickly according to nuclear experts. If Iran did that, it would have enough material for about 10 nuclear weapons, according to the US and Israeli officials. The Iranians would still need to take several additional steps, such as turning the uranium into a gas to form to metal, then fashioning it into a bomb design. Which I think that's the part where they start to run into issue with this. If you're interested in, by the way, why I think that a lot of this is crap, I will start this by saying I know that it's a slog, because it took me well over a year to do. It took me almost 2 years to read the book. Part of that involved a very, very, very big move, and a lot of calling around and doing that, so I had to put it on the back burner. But The Sum of All Fears, a Tom Clancy book. Excuse me. I consider that recommended reading if you're sitting in a situation where you want to know whether or not we're in actual danger of getting the bomb, and Iran getting the bomb, and being able to use the bomb. That's the hardest part, is being able to use the bomb. And what I mean when I say that is there is a very, very complex pattern and series of steps to actually make a working nuclear weapon. There were well over 700 pages describing, in a deliberately incorrect manner, by the way, how a nuclear bomb is created. And the characters in that particular book were using an actual already functional bomb that had been lost in one of the Israeli strikes in the 70s. Been buried under the desert. So all the mechanicals were still there, badly worn and damaged from sitting under the sand for, at that point, 20 years. But it was physically present, and it still, according to the timeline of the book, was a several-month process to get it back to a functional position, and then actually find a warhead to get into it to go back and commit the damage. And they still didn't get it right, by the way, and it basically only set off an EMP and killed a handful of people outside the Super Bowl of that particular year. But with that being said, with everything off of this, it's not just a process. Like, they don't get 90% enriched uranium and then go back out and light a match and destroy the entire world. It doesn't work that easily. And I would be curious if they actually had the technology and capability, once they had the weapons grade, the 90% enrichment, to actually still be able to go back and utilize it. Or if that in and of itself is just a waste, and how long they are away from the utilization process of it. It's possible that they've captured and reverse engineered a nuclear weapon so they can go back and do this on their own already. Prior to this attack, if Iran had headed down the path, it could likely produce a rudimentary bomb in around 6 months, according to David Albright, the president of the Institute for Science and International Security, which closely monitors Iran's nuclear program. The chaos of the current conflict has scrambled many previous calculations, but experts say Israel has set back Iran's program in attacks on multiple nuclear sites, including airstrikes that have killed at least 9 Iranian nuclear scientists, according to the Israeli military. I think Israel's lengthening the time Iran would need to make nuclear weapons, probably significantly, Albright said. So, I don't necessarily believe that they're on the cusp of it. Alright, Trump meets with the national security team on Iran as U.S. prepares to evacuate citizens from Israel. This is from yesterday, from Kevin Breininger and Roxandra Iordash at CNBC. Briefly on this one. Trump is meeting with his NatSec team in the White House Situation Room for the second time in 2 days as he considers whether to order a military strike against Iran amid its ongoing conflict with Israel. The meeting began shortly before 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, a White House official told NBC News. By the way, Starship exploded during a routine test in Texas, which means that SpaceX, is doing the same thing that Homer Hickam did in the movie October Sky. Just blowing up rockets till he gets it right. The meeting began shortly before 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, a White House official told NBC News. So, we'll see what happens with that. There's not much to add there. Of course, they're in the Situation Room. And of course, we have no idea. And I do want to be a big shot, by the way. From the Daily Wire. We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. What's funny about that is I didn't put it on the stack, but I'm going to go back and find it. There was one where the guy saw this and tried to connect this all to Epstein, and dude legitimately... Yeah, it's this one here. I'll put this up here. Try to connect the whole thing to Epstein. We're going to read a little bit of this one here because this one makes Dale Gribble seem sane. Trump issued a powerful statement regarding the situation in Iran after Israel's conducted numerous airstrikes targeting the Iranian regime's military assets, saying that we now control the skies over Iran. The term "we" caught the eye of many given questions over whether the U.S. will increase its involvement in the campaign and eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities. Trump has stepped up his rhetoric aimed at Iran in the last 24 hours and followed up his statement with threats aimed at Iran's leadership. I don't care so much about that in and of itself, but it's this right here. So, 589 bull, which he's spreading a lot of bull here. I put this right in the comment. I said, Jesus, dude, you make Dale Gribble seem sane. He quote X's this: we now have complete and total control of the skies in Iran. Iran has good sky trackers and other defensive equipment, and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old USA, per Trump. Here's what 589 Bull had to say. Are you ready? Strap yourselves in, this is a good one. Trump just said the US has complete control of Iranian airspace, but instead of bombing, he's doing something way more dangerous. He's protecting it. Why? Because the real war isn't missiles, it's data. 3 days ago, Iran claimed to have seized 3 terabytes of highly sensitive Israeli intelligence data. Not leaked, not confirmed, just obtained. And even if 5% of the haul includes the Epstein files, yes, that's where he's going with this. Everything changes. You think those files were in US courts? No shot. They were locked in servers in Tel Aviv because Epstein wasn't just a predator, he was a weapon, and Mossad pulled the trigger. Now Iran might have the receipts, so what does Trump do? He doesn't bomb, he doesn't escalate. He flexes and locks the skies over Iran down. Complete dominance, 0 strikes. Almost like he's guarding something. Think about, this is about oil or nukes? No, it's about leverage. Because if Iran is holding the blackmail archive that rules the West, you don't destroy the target, you protect it until it's useful. Trump can't release the Epstein files without implicating half of the US government. But if Iran leaks them, that's not a scandal. That's a cyber attack by a foreign enemy. The story shifts, the truth drops, and Trump walks away clean. The Epstein files are the kill switch. And Trump just surrounded the one country that might be crazy enough and righteous enough to press it. This isn't a war, this is a checkmate in a global blackmail game. Dude, home slice made Dale Gribble seem sane. Alright, back on the Situation Room stuff. Hegseth tells Senate panel he's giving Trump options amid intensifying Iran-Israel conflict. From Carolyn Linton. Hegseth declined to elaborate on potential U.S. involvement in the Iran-Israel conflict, telling a Senate panel Wednesday his job is to ensure Trump has options and informed of what those options might be. Hegseth and Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, testified Wednesday before the Senate Armed Services Committee as the president mulls joining Israel's offensive against Iran. My job, our job, Chairman and I, is at all times is to make sure that the president, has options and is informed of what those options might be and what the ramifications are of what those options might be, Hegseth said, which I feel at this point there probably were already things in place to make sure that there were the options to do this. So this isn't really a huge one, honestly. He was responding to questions from Senator Jeanine Shaheen, who asked if he had been asked to actively provide options for the president regarding a strike in the Middle East. Shaheen noted the U.S. 40,000 troops stationed in the region, many of whom are in range of Iranian missiles. later in Hegseth's testimony, he said Iran had an opportunity to make a deal. They should have made a deal. President Trump's word means something. The world understands that. And at the Defense Department, our job is to stand ready and prepared with options. That's precisely what they're doing, which is, again, what the DoD does in any worldwide conflict, whether the U.S. is involved or not. All right, let's grab another one from NPR. This is the split. We're still on the first story, by the way. Pro-Trump media figures split over the U.S. role in the Israel-Iran conflict. As hostilities between Iran and Israel escalate, Trump raises the possibility of U.S. military involvement in the conflict. Some of his influential supporters online are publicly disagreeing with him. A rare occurrence in the pro-Trump media sphere, because guess what? Anybody who is against Democrats in any way is in a cult, the Trump cult. So they can't disagree. A day after Israel launched its attack on Iran, Tucker Carlson wrote a newsletter titled An Act of War, sponsored by the U.S., and talked about its objections with Steve Bannon. Trump fired back at Carlson on Monday, writing in True Social that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Someone please explain this to kooky Tucker Carlson, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Since then, multiple pro-Trump influencers defended Carlson and publicly disagreed with Trump on the issue. Trump just completely fractured the base. Truly unbelievable, wrote Candace Owens. One of Trump's closest congressional allies, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a plant, has also came to Carlson's defense. I'm starting to question my allegation that she's a plant, by the way. Tucker Carlson is one of my favorite people. Foreign wars, intervention, regime change, put America last, kill innocent people, are making us broke and will ultimately lead to our destruction. That's kooky. Alex Jones posted later in the evening. Trump attacking Tucker Carlson for supporting a new world, or not supporting a new world war, is not something that any sane person should support. This is the stuff nightmares are made of. They're playing out the battle in a way based on the positions they've advocated for ages, said Daniel Silverman, professor at Carnegie Mellon University, whose research includes how information travels during conflicts. Tucker Carlson's been very consistent on not picking fights with Iran. Back to the first Trump admin, it's notable that they're doing it so openly. Initial polling suggests that many Americans have concerns about the U.S. militarily engaging with Iran. A weekly YouGov Economist poll published Tuesday found around 60% of Americans across the spectrum don't think the U.S. military should be involved in the conflict between Israel and Iran, which that in and of itself does fill me with a little bit of what I would say is comfort. Because the old Bushite side of things of regime change in the Middle East is dying. Now, one thing to keep in mind with all of this is the fact that there's been next to no change in the position as far as regime change in Ukraine or Russia goes. And I'm sure that a lot of them would love to come back out and see a lot more of that, but in the House, reps from both parties, including Massey, Canna, and Cortez, are seeking to require the president to gain congressional approval before military intervention in the conflict. We'll talk about that a little bit later, because I've got a bunch of stuff on that. Still, some right-wing social media influencers do support Trump's actions. Laura Loomer, America First is whatever President Trump says it is, which is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. Charlie Kirk, moments like this, I have full complete trust in President Trump. Of course you do. Others have tried to strike a tone of unity, like Posobiec. When people warned that a regime change war could break up the MAGA coalition, consider that's exactly what the neocons want, he wrote on X. That's fair, but that still doesn't mean you have to go back out and world police. Later, he suggested Trump's rhetoric might serve as domestic agenda. What if 20 million illegals were suddenly disappeared? While cable news is focused on the Middle East chestnut checkers, which I don't necessarily think it's about the ICE raids on that one, but I would question whether or not, hey, have you forgotten about the big beautiful bill yet? So they're claiming it's a big fight. I don't think it's as big of a fight as it is, but I do think the Bushites are licking their chops right now. Tucker Carlson spars with Ted Cruz. You don't know anything about Iran. An interview between Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz about Israel's military campaign against Iran became contentious when the ex-Fox News host quizzed the Texas Republican about Iran, highlighting the rift among Trump's allies. The back and forth hinged on Cruz's backing of Israeli strikes against Iranian targets. The Trump admin has stated the U.S. is not directly involved in the offensive, but it's helped Israel defend against Iranian counterattacks. And Trump has weighed conducting strikes on Iranian nuclear targets, CBS News has previously reported. Carlson, a vocal skeptic of military intervention, questioned the premise of joining a war with Iran and criticized Cruz for saying he would like the Iranian regime to be toppled, saying Cruz at one point, "You don't know anything about Iran." One of the most contentious exchanges in the 2-hour interview, which was released in full on X on Wednesday, came when Carlson asked Cruz what Iran's population is. Cruz said he wasn't sure. "You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?" Carlson asked. "Look, I don't sit around memorizing population tables," Cruz reported. The host then followed up by asking Senator Cruz about Iran's demographics. When Cruz said they were Persians, predominantly Shia Muslims, Carlson asked him for the percentage, frustrating the Texas senator. "Okay, I'm not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran," Cruz said. The two Trump supporters also argued whether Iran has sought to assassinate Mr. Trump, which Netanyahu alleges last week. Federal prosecutors last year announced charges against an Iranian asset, accusing him of plotting to kill Mr. Trump. Cruz cited the alleged assassination plots while criticizing Iran's leadership, but Carlson questioned why the senator hadn't instead supported immediate U.S. military action if he believed Iran has tried to kill Mr. Trump. Cruz, meanwhile, suggested Carlson had, at one point, a weird obsession with Israel. When Carlson asked about support from the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, Carlson said he interpreted the comment as an accusation of anti-Semitism, which Cruz denied. "You don't know anything about the country whose government you want to overthrow, and you're calling me reckless?" Carlson said in a late interview. I do want to listen to that one. That sounds entertaining, to say the least. It's kind of funny when people that I don't care for are fighting back and forth. On the neocon side, Iran dangerous to peace, says GOP rep who backs Trump on U.S. military involvement. From Steve Inskeep. Mike Lawler of New York agrees with President Trump that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon and would support a move by the president to strike and fully eliminate Tehran's nuclear program. I wonder how many assets from Raytheon Lawler has in his portfolio. When some of these people are talking about, hey, let's go back and go drop bombs and do stuff on Middle Eastern soil, I want to see what their portfolios are. I want to see exactly how they stand to get rich off of some of this like that. A nuclear Iran will seek to eradicate Israel and all but ensure World War III, Lawler said in a post on X. We cannot allow that to happen. We must stand with Israel. So that's where that goes. What else do we have? J.D. Vance weighing in on this one, and we'll read this in almost verbatim. I might paraphrase some of the stuff around here. Look, I'm seeing this from the inside, and I'm admittedly biased toward our president and my friend, but there's a lot of crazy stuff on social media, so I wanted to address some of the things on the Iran issue. First, the president has been amazingly consistent over 10 years that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Over the last few months, he encouraged his foreign policy team to reach a deal with Iranians. To accomplish this goal, the president has made clear that Iran cannot have uranium enrichment, and has said repeatedly that this would happen one of two ways, the easy way or the other way. Second, I've seen a lot of confusion over the issue of civilian nuclear power and uranium enrichment. These are distinct issues. Iran could have civilian nuclear power without enrichment, but Iran rejected that. Meanwhile, they've enriched uranium far above the level necessary for any civilian purposes. They've been found in violation of their non-proliferation obligations by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is hardly a right-wing organization. It's one thing to want civilian nuclear energy. It's another thing to demand sophisticated enrichment capacity. It's still another to cling to enrichment while simultaneously violating the basic non-proliferation obligations and enriching right to the point of weapons-grade uranium, which again, they're not close to yet. I've yet to see a single good argument for why Iran needed to enrich uranium well above the threshold for civilian use. I've yet to see a single good argument for why Iran was justified in violating its non-proliferation obligations. I've yet to see a single good pushback against the IAEA's findings. I need to go back to physics and chemistry class. I do. Because I actually want to see. I do question whether or not, like, more pure uranium, like if you took it to 60%, if it got a higher energy density in civilian nuclear power. And I don't know the answer to that, by the way, and I'll fully admit to the fact that I have no idea. I'd like to see if that's the case or if that's not the case, and it does look like they're going to weapons grade. But where I'm going with that and why I say that I want to know about this and learn about this is the fact that I would almost say with full certainty that the vast majority of the people who are yelling about Iran's nuclear capability for civilian use don't know the answer either. They know what they've been told by Newsmax and Fox and things like that. But they know it with a certain certainty that you can't sit back and argue with. I will come right out and say I don't know the answer. I'm not ashamed to say it because I would rather learn. Meanwhile, the president has shown remarkable restraint in keeping our military's focus on protecting our troops and protecting our citizens. He may decide he needs to take further action and to end Iranian enrichment. That decision ultimately belongs to the president, and of course the people are right to be worried about foreign entanglements after the last 25 years of idiotic foreign policy. But I believe the president has earned some trust on the issue, and having seen this up close and personal, I can assure you that he's only interested in using the American military to accomplish the American people's goals. Whatever he does, that is his focus. Look, all I'm saying is don't put us in a position where my kids are in harm's way somewhere down the road. On the financial side, a brief one from Reuters. Go away, advertisement. Oil settles higher as Iran-Israel conflict enters 6th day. So yes, with all this going on, you are probably going to feel a bit of a pinch at the pump from Stephanie Kelly. It's not a huge pinch, but it's there. U.S. involvement in Israel-Iran. I'm sorry, that's the summary. Oil prices settled higher on Wednesday in a volatile session as investors weighed the chance of supply disruptions from the Iran-Israel conflict and potential U.S. direct involvement, which, again, that's a big part of the reason, folks, that we should be doing more of our own drilling and refining here. I think we do a lot of our refining here, but more of our drilling here. Because oil is a global commodity. And yeah, the littlest thing, especially in the Middle East, is going to change the supply chain and, well, make it more expensive. So if we've got our own reserves, and then can also fill the global supply and hold the price down. I say we should probably do that. Brent crude futures settled 25 cents higher at $76.70 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate rose 30 cents to $75.14, which, reminder, last week these were in the low 60s. Earlier in the session, prices were down around 2%. On Tuesday, prices jumped over 4%. So, we'll keep an eye on that, and keep an eye on your Gas Buddy app. Putin says Russia could help broker a deal between Iran and Israel. I don't necessarily think that's true because they've got too much else on their plate right now. But I think that was an emasculation move from Putin. I'm not going into this article. I just wanted to put that headline out there. Revolution. And we are closing on the end of this one. Finally, we're closing into the end of war stuff. Will Israel's airstrikes cause the collapse of the Iranian regime? Answer before we read the article from NPC News. Actually, yes, that's a possibility. Regime changes. It's what our country's been doing since Carter. From Dan DeLuce and Alexander Smith. With this country having killed some of Iran's top military commanders and rattled its leadership, Netanyahu says his government's aerial assaults on Iran could trigger the collapse of the regime, opening the door to a popular uprising. It's impossible to predict, but it could be the result of our mighty action, Netanyahu told reporters. We're changing the face of the Middle East. That scenario, according to scholars who study Iran, as well as former U.S. and Israeli officials, is unlikely. The theocratic government remains so deeply unpopular, but still has the tight grip on power, and no organized opposition is poised to seize authority, they say. And if there's change at the top, it might come not from the popular uprisings, but from a coup within the regime, which might produce an even more authoritarian result. And that's always the risk, isn't it? Hang on, my soul is healed. We've got to let our souls heal for a moment. Anybody who was watching on Instagram got to that point and got really, really confused. Because remember, nothing that comes from my headphones goes to the Instagram feed. Neither does any of the news behind us. Alright, our soul is healed. Let's keep going. It's impossible to predict, but it could result in our mighty action. This scenario, according to scholars who study Iran as well as former U.S. Israeli officials, is unlikely. We know that one. Still, the Iranian government is struggling to cope with the attack. Some experts say that even if Israel's onslaught does not topple the regime, it could inflict permanent damage, leaving it in a weakened state that could embolden opposition activists or fuel internal power struggles inside the theocratic system. After having initially targeted nuclear and missile sites at the start of its air campaign last week, Israel has expanded its target list to include oil facilities, police headquarters, and the state television center, all representing crucial elements of the government's political and economic power. They're going after the apparatus of repression inside the regime, said Mark Dubowitz, CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a think tank that's called for imposing tougher sanctions and other measures against Iran. If they weaken the security services used to crush dissent in Iran, the strikes could open up more space for opponents of the regime, Dubowitz said. So, there are a few things with this going on specifically right now. Now, as far as Iran goes, yes, there has been a lot of dissent from a lot of the regions of the country towards the policies in Tehran right now. And one thing to keep in mind as the airstrikes go and they affect the supply chains, the food supplies, etc., is most scholars agree that any society is 3 missed meals away from a revolution. It's been a precarious point that Iran has been in basically since I started analyzing politics back in 2018. With that being said, is there going to be enough dissent at this point to go back out and actually to do something and get something to go over? And the more important question in that is, what comes in its place? What comes after the fact? And what fills the power vacuum in there? Now, it's not just a matter of the people rise up and they go back and they form a democracy because Israel was striking enough of the power facilities and got so many people angry with the government that they turned around and pushed the government out of Tehran, pushed the IRGC out. But the fact of the matter is you typically do still need a face of the revolution, a person to come back in and be the top of it, whether that's the person or... It's... When I look at something like this is, for me, one of the reasons I love the Hunger Games so much, and both the books and the movies were written so well to show how this actually works in reality. Like, okay, we're going to put spoiler alert in here. If you have not seen the Hunger Games and you don't want the ending spoiled, stop the live stream right now and give me about 10 minutes. Come back, go hang out for a little bit, get your coffee, whatnot, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes here. Alright, with that being said, now that the few people who have not seen the Hunger Games have not, in the end, it is a matter of that the revolution, the people who were fueling the revolution were looking to be as authoritarian and, dare I say, I mean, the powers that came in the Hunger Games were revolutionaries who formed an authoritarian government in the heels of a revolution against the initial U.S. government, and then now they were repressing everybody else in the government. And then to turn around and go be toppled by another president who had her own ambitions of an authoritarian government to go back and repress those people because of what they had done to everyone else in Pan Am at the time. And the fact of the matter is when you've got that, a lot of the times, when you have a situation of a revolution, there's something more authoritarian sitting there waiting in the wings to come back out and be there. And that's, I mean, do we have another different Islamic faction that's ready to come back in and take over and go back and oppress the Shias that are currently running the Iranian government right now? Does Al-Qaeda, who is right next door, want to come in and say, hey, we kicked the U.S. out already, we want to be your friend, let's go back and have a conversation, and we come back into an even more repressive regime? I mean, it doesn't always turn out like Iraq and Saudi Arabia do, or the U.S. at that matter. And there is going to be a power vacuum and a lot of very interested people who are interested in that region of the map. I know that Mogwai isn't here to come back and talk about the map, but let's actually bring up the map and just look at the trade routes that are involved in this specific area. No, I don't want Iran and Israel. I just want the map. Maps. Here we go. And again, those of you on the audio platform, you're not hearing, but just like Israel having one of the biggest and most successful ports of anything coming in from the European world and what used to be known as the Hellenistic world, which is still a major trade hub, coming into the Middle East and having to go mostly through Israel because it's dangerous to go through Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey. When you look at Iran, whoever controls Iran controls trade that comes out of Africa, Europe, because, well, Russia is such a power player up and going that direction, and controls road travel and land travel to India, China, and Oceania. So that is going to be a juicy target for a lot of power players in this region, if you do have a power vacuum. Let's see, what else do we have here? The beams are on. Iran axes internet. Musk turns on Starlink to around Iranian dissidents' access. So, Musk himself might be pushing for the regime change. From Hank Berrien. By the way, if you have not seen the Hunger Games, you're probably all coming back at this point. So, welcome back. And Wrist on Sundays wants me to have the best viewers on streamboo.com. But, you know, I don't want the best viewers, so Wrist and Sundays, I think you can be quiet for just a little while. We'll let you have a timeout and think about what you did. No bans. We don't ban here. But, yeah, you can take 10 minutes and think about that for just a minute. I like how everyone just got Nightbots to take out people who are spamming the best viewers stuff. And then they think that they can just get around it by putting a space in and saying, oh yeah, no, take the space out. Like, we don't notice this as it's going by. After the Iranian regime turned off the internet in Iran, effectively preventing the Iranian people from knowing the damage caused by the regime, or caused to the regime by Israel's military strikes, and thus emboldening them to challenge the regime, free speech advocate Elon Musk confirmed he turned on Starlink, allowing the Iranian people to access the internet. Musk responded to Fox News host and radio host Mark Levine, who noted Elon Musk can put the final nail in the coffin of the Iranian regime by providing Starlink internet to the Iranian people. Iran rather cut off all internet so the people cannot organize a coup and communicate. The beams are on, Musk succinctly responded. So, I don't know what happens in that. I don't know if that's the goal of what's even going on with this right now. That's entirely a possibility, is try to force a regime change. Let's see, what else do we have? In something that I was the understanding happened under the Biden admin, but apparently it didn't go through, from CBS News, lawmakers move to limit Trump's war powers as Israel-Iran war escalates. And this is a bipartisan push. This is something I'm actually in support of. Because I didn't like it when Bush could do it. I didn't like it when Bush 1 could do it. I certainly didn't like it when Obama and Biden can do it. And, well, we saw an immense amount of restraint in the first Trump term, but still, I want to make sure that even if we get restraint in this particular administration, we don't come down and get another Bush in office in 2028 and have to go through all of this all over again. From Caitlin Yellick and Kaya Hubbard. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are looking to limit President Trump's ability to order U.S. strikes in Iran amid its ongoing war with Israel, emphasizing that only Congress has the power to declare war under the Constitution. Well, right, but these are just military actions, and this isn't a war. We're in an advisory role, said Bush. This is not our war, Thomas Massie said in a post on X, announcing he had introduced a measure under the 73 War Powers resolution to block U.S. strikes. Even if it were, Congress must decide such matters according to our Constitution. The Constitution grants Congress the sole power to declare war, and the extent of the president's authority to wade into conflict abroad without the approval of the legislative branch has been challenged in recent years. In 20, Trump faced criticism for his decision to strike Iranian military leader Qasem Soleimani without notifying congressional leaders. I was one of the people criticizing. I was not thrilled with that. Massey's resolution aims to force the president to seek congressional approval before entering a war with Iran and would terminate the use of U.S. armed forces against Iran without Congress's express approval. It's co-sponsored by Ro Khanna, who urged every member to go on record in a post on X on Monday. Are you with the neocons who let us into Iraq, or do you stand with the American people? Khanna said. The privilege resolution would force a vote on the matter within a number of days. The House is currently in recess, but leaders will be forced to engage with a push upon their return. The vote would put Speaker Johnson, a Louisiana neocon, in a difficult position given his strong support of Israel and the president, which, by the way, he might block a vote on that because the Israel conflict is in his best interest. Tim Kaine is leading an effort in the Senate to introduce a similar resolution on Monday that forces a vote on requiring Trump to get congressional approval or a formal declaration of a war to attack Iran unless the U.S. is defending itself against an imminent attack. Now, the fact that Kaine is doing this specifically towards Trump, I dislike that a lot. I like where Massey is going with his version of this based on the fact that this is a limit of all presidents from here on out. Kaine seems to be considering going back and doing this specifically for Trump, and I mean, I can't help but sit here and think to myself, if they're doing this on a specific president, then they might want to still have the ability to go back and do something against Russia or Iran on particular full executive fiat. I do want the ability to be back in Congress because I want the people who vote for it to have to go back and face their own voters. We watched too much of this under the Bush administration, the Bush regime, and I don't want to see any more of it. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it to death. What else do we have? Massey to field bipartisan war powers resolution, AOC signal support. We know about that already. Some of the stuff has to refresh, save a memory, of course. David Hogg even getting in on this one, by the way. Which, and again, I remind you, David Hogg would be saying something exactly the opposite if we were sitting here still talking about the Ukraine and Russia. So Hogg himself is a hypocrite on this one. David Hogg says any Democrat who supports this war with Iran needs to be primaried. Our generation grew up going through two multi-trillion-dollar wars we should have never been involved in. Ukraine. We are not going back to that. If you think this is a good idea, go read a history book. Ukraine. Excuse me. I had something in my throat there. It's starting to look like it's going to storm out there. And, well, that's everything that I have for Iran. That was a lot. We talked a lot about a lot of that. There was a lot of stuff going on that one. Now we're going to go back and talk about what I thought I was going to be talking about all week this week. Crowder starting off with this one. I can't believe I'm citing Crowder on anything, but our hearts go out to all those affected in Minnesota, especially the family and friends of Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark. CNN is now reporting that a hit list of nearly 70 targets was found in the suspect's car, but of the 70 targets, the only ones CNN describes are abortion providers. What about all the others? Why not name them as well? So, Crowder immediately going out and trying to go back and make this political. But in the wake and the midst of the No Kings protests this past Saturday, A gentleman named Vance Belter made news based on the fact that he dressed up in a police outfit and went to the home of several Minnesota lawmakers, killed one, I believe injured a second one. I don't think he killed the second one. And both of their spouses as well. I want to talk about this before I read the articles, because there's been a lot of debate over this guy, whether or not he was a Democrat because he was appointed by Walz, who he was, what his background was, who he voted for. And there are a few things that I want to put to bed. First thing for me, is the fact that I don't believe for a second that this guy is the killer. And I think the Democrats in this one, I do think this was a staged attempt to go back and garner sympathy for the No Kings protest and take the numbers that they didn't think that they were going to get out of the news and possibly tried to dissuade some people away from there, so they had a reason to say that, oh, well, it was small crowds. People were afraid of getting murdered by evil MAGA person. This, that, and the next thing. What I want to say about this is I do think that if that's the case, that they played their hand too far. And what I mean by that is one of the biggest arguments that we've had over the past 5 weeks with the ICE raids is the fact that the ICE people are not giving badge numbers, they're wearing masks and they're wearing street clothes as they go in and start pulling people out for targeted deportation. And that this could be just any civilian out there who hasn't even deputized and going and doing this, impersonating law enforcement, just getting an ICE patch on their arm and pretending to be ICE. I was curious about this entire situation, what happened, how it led up to it, and whether or not this could be an actual political motive to go back and off a Democrat for one reason or another, until I saw the fact that he was wearing a law enforcement uniform to go up into these people's houses. And that just, to me, screamed, this is too on point for the agenda that these people are trying to do. I don't believe a word of this at face value. I don't know what happened with this. I don't know if Belter actually did it. I don't know if he's being a patsy for this. I don't know anything about the situation. But this is just too perfect on the message that our friends on the left are trying to push right now for me to fully accept in and of itself at face value. I do believe that, yes, the Minnesota lawmaker is dead and that a person impersonating a police officer went up to her door. As far as the rest of it, just... there's something off about this. But we never have to hear another word about it because now, hey, we're talking about Iran and Israel. From Minivan Burke and Chloe Atkins. What we know about Vance Belter, the suspect in the Minnesota lawmaker shootings, who was taken alive somehow, by the way. The man suspected of fatally shooting a Democratic Minnesota state rep and her husband, and wounding another state legislator and his wife, was captured in a Green Isle field Sunday evening after a massive 2-day manhunt. Authorities said Vance Belter wore a hyper-realistic silicone face mask, body armor, and a tactical vest to impersonate a law enforcement officer when he carried out the violent rampage early on Saturday. Yeah, this sounds way too close to the narrative that people are trying to tell us about ICE agents and targeted deportations. He planned his attack carefully, acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Minnesota, Joseph Thompson, said, and he used the internet to research his victims and their families. He conducted surveillance on their homes and took notes on the homes' locations, Thompson said at a news conference on Monday. Belter also allegedly purchased materials to make a face police license plate for his SUV and equipped the vehicle with law enforcement-style lights before the shootings that killed the Democratic State Rep Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark Hortman and wounded State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette Hoffman. Thompson said it's clear Belter had been planning these attacks for quite some time. He faces both federal and state charges. In an online video, Belter described himself as a married father of 5 from Green Isle, Minnesota. He said he works for 2 funeral homes and previously worked for 3 decades in the food industry. Belter said in the video that he once traveled to the Democratic Republic of Congo to partner with farmers and fishermen and help stimulate the country's food supply system. Belter had a handful of traffic violations, including speeding and not using a seatbelt, records show. According to a statement, he attended Christ for the Nations Institute from 88 to 90, when he graduated with a diploma in practical theology, in leadership, and pastoral. Records show he purchased his Green Isle home for more than $500,000 in 23. During a federal court hearing on Monday, Belter said he now makes $540 a week through his part-time job and could not afford a lawyer, as federal defender declined to comment. Yeah, dude, something doesn't add up here. Something is not right here. Authorities have located his wife and found 2 handguns, about $10,000 in cash, and passports for her and her children in her vehicle, the affidavit says. After the shootings, he allegedly texted his family, "Dad went to war last night. I don't want to say any more because I don't want to implicate anybody." His wife also received a text from him saying, "Words are not going to explain how sorry I am for this situation. There's going to be some people coming to the house armed and trigger happy, and I don't want you guys around. The motive for the attacks remains unclear." I don't know, dude. There's something off about this whole thing. Something is wrong. Something does not add up in this situation. And I don't know what the actual answer is, and I'll be fully open about that fact. But what we're being presented at face value is not what happened in this situation. I can tell you that. CPS News, fact check, Governor Walz's appointment of Minnesota lawmaker shooting the suspect to advisory board. From Beret Leon, Carolyn Cummings, Stephen Swanson. Vance Belter is the Sherburne County Jail on Tuesday in Elk River, Minnesota, facing federal and state charges for the shootings that killed a representative and her husband and wounded a state senator and his wife. House Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were shot inside their Brooklyn Park home overnight on Saturday. About 90 minutes before that, police say Belter shot Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette at their home in Champlin. Both Hoffmans were struck multiple times and are still recovering. About 6 years ago, Belter was appointed to the Minnesota Governor's Workforce Development Board by Tim Walz, but what exactly does being appointed to the board mean? State records show Belter served 2 consecutive 3-year terms in the development board, first appointed by then Governor Mark Dayton in 2016. 3 years later, Walz reappointed him. A spokesperson for Walz's office gave the statement to WCCO on Tuesday. There are thousands of volunteers of all political persuasions who serve on hundreds of these boards. That particular board had over 60 people on it. The governor does not interview applicants for these roles, but he does not know Belter. They are not appointments to a position in the governor's cabinet. These are boards and commissions that have no authority to make decisions, change laws, or implement policies. According to the Development Board's website, it represents key leaders from business, education, labor, community-based organizations, and government, with the board providing a venue for workforce stakeholders building on a shared vision and mission. During Belter's second term, which ended in January 23, he served alongside Senator Jim Hoffman. It's unclear at this point if the two worked closely. David Schultz, political science professor at Hamline in St. Paul, says under state law, the governor appoints hundreds of people to dozens of boards across the state, ranging in topics as disparate as amateur sports, mosquito control, and tourism. I still believe that he should probably know a little bit about the people he's hiring, or at least have an advisor come out and say, hey, this guy is a Republican nutjob. Schultz says appointees are unpaid and the state's boards are more technical than political. With bipartisan appointments and essentially citizen volunteers, the governor's role, according to Schultz, is more ceremonial. They're not vetted or reviewed personally by the governor. In many cases, this is done, as it should be, by subordinates, who then bring to the governor their recommendations, Schultz said. There's no difference than what we would find in business and industry, where we don't expect the president of the most companies to be involved in hiring for every position. So, I think at this point, CBS is trying to distance Walz from this. NPR telling us the shooting had a hit list of 45 officials. Authorities found voluminous writings of the suspect's vehicle at his home. They theorized he'd been planning and researching lawmakers for several months, Thompson says. As of now, it's unclear why the alleged gunman carried out the attacks. Now, we've never seen these voluminous writings, of course. That's the other thing that bothers me about this. And what I noticed right away is immediately as soon as this happened, we were told that he had a manifesto. It didn't get released. And then after they arrested him, they said, oh no manifesto, nothing to see here. One of the funniest things that I saw come out about this is the fact that they're trying to say that they're going to forego any federal charges and charge him on state charges because otherwise Trump's he's gonna pardon him. Fox 9 with the full list of charges against Bolter. Federal count 1, stalking Melissa Hortman. Let's see, we've got 4 state counts and 6 federal counts, so he's facing 10 counts right now. Stalking Melissa Hortman, stalking of John Hoffman, federal count 3, murder of Melissa Hortman through use of a firearm, federal count 4, murder of Mark Hortman through use of a firearm, shooting of Melissa Mark Hortman's firearms offense, so it's a double up. Federal count 6, shooting of John Yvette Hoffman, firearms offense. On the state side, state count 1, murder second degree, victim 1, Melissa Hortman. State count 2, murder second degree, victim 1, Mark Hortman. State count 3, murder second degree, John Hoffman. State count 4, murder second degree, Yvette Hoffman. What's interesting about that is they're using murder 2 on these, which crime of passion, which means that he didn't think about this. Typically murder 2 is if you're in the middle of an argument with somebody and you grab your sidearm off the side and shoot that person, but you had no intention to do that prior to going and getting in the argument. Whereas if he had a hit list and he had a stalking charge and everything else, that to me would come back out and say murder 1, premeditated, full out. So I have some questions about that. Eric Matheny, how is Vance Belter not charged with first degree murder? He went over to the homes with intent to kill. So some of this doesn't make sense. We did have a community note on this one, so I may have to walk some of my past article back. This community note wasn't here when I started this last night. Prosecutors will seek first-degree murder charges. In Minnesota, it's common practice to initially charge someone with second-degree to secure a warrant as quickly as possible. First-degree requires a grand jury indictment, while second-degree does not. Which, I guess that would actually make sense based on the crime of passion side of things. Because typically, with second-degree murder, it's the fact that you got in the argument, you pulled out the knife, you stabbed the person you got in the argument with, you killed that person, and then you went on the run. So they don't need to go back and convene a grand jury to go back and haul your ass in. Excuse my language. That makes actual legal sense to me. So to basically go back and use the loophole to go back and get this guy hauled in, I can see that. Udichus. I think I pronounced that right. The facts are obvious. The woman was assassinated, was a U.S. congresswoman who voted against her party allowing illegals to help them continue their medical grift with illegals. His wife is a Minnesota doctor who stood up to make infinite money through illegal Medicaid fraud. So, and again, we're going on the full... Oh, this comes back up too. How could the MSM already know that Vance Belter was a registered Republican in 22? I've seen proof that he was registered as a Republican in Oklahoma in 04. But his Minnesota voter registration does not show party affiliation. Yeah, that's one other thing to go with this, because they brought up his voting record from 04. from a closed primary state like Oklahoma, where you have to sit back and show your voter registration. But the crimes happen in Minnesota, where there's no, like, you don't do party registration. There's no closed primary in Minnesota. It's the same as Wisconsin. I have voted in Democratic primaries before in Wisconsin, mostly to throw off the status quo and change the way that that people are being elected, and maybe throw some more support for Bernie, because, well, especially like in 2020, where there was no real primary challenge to the current president, and I'm not a Republican anyway. Like, you could go back and vote in the primary for whoever you thought was the best, or because of the foregone conclusion in that case, you turn around and grab the Democrat ballot and say, hey, vote for Bernie, just to throw a number away from Joe Biden. And you can do that in Minnesota too. So basically, there's no way of knowing how this guy voted or what ballots he was taking from 04 on. Nick Sorter, also on this one, Melissa Hortman, sounded absolutely terrified while speaking to the media after she voted no on healthcare for illegals. And she was assassinated this morning. She knew she'd end up as a target in one form or the other. Let's listen.
I know that people will be hurt by that vote, and we worked very hard to try to get a budget deal that wouldn't include that provision. I know that people will be hurt.
Yeah. There is something else going on this one. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say I know what, and I know a lot of people online are right now. They're telling you that they know what's going on with this. I don't know what's going on with this, but I can tell you that this is not what it was presented as. That's the most that I can tell you about this one. I'm skipping this one. Walz told people to be meaner, then blamed Trump's mean tweets for political violence. What's the funniest about this one is how quickly they were able to go back and trot a bunch of people out to say that this guy was total hardcore Republican, this, that, the next thing. And, well, first things first, I know a lot of people who consider themselves to be conservative Republican and are full of soy and just trying to find some way to belong. I met one of them back last May. Yeah, it was last May. I met one of them. From what our mutual acquaintance told me, he said he was very, very Republican. I don't know. I could smell the soy coming off this boy, though. Friends say Minnesota shooting suspect was deeply religious and conservative. From Jim Mustian and Michael Biesecker. The man accusing of assassinating the top Democrat in the Minnesota House held deeply religious and politically conservative views, telling a congregation in Africa 2 years ago that the U.S. was a bad place where most churches don't oppose abortion. Vance Belter was captured late Sunday following a 2-day search authorities described as the largest in the state's history. Belter is accused of impersonating a police officer and gunning down former House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark in their home outside Minneapolis. Senator John Hoffman, also a Democrat, and his wife Yvette were shot earlier by the same gunman in their home but survived. Friends and former colleagues interviewed by the Associated Press described Belter as a devout Christian who attended evangelical church and went to campaign rallies for Trump. Records show Belter registered to vote as a Republican while living in Oklahoma in 2004 before moving to Minnesota, where voters don't list a party affiliation. Near the scene, authorities say they found an SUV made to look like those used by law enforcement. Inside, they found flyers for a local anti-Trump No Kings rally scheduled for Saturday, and a notebook with the names of other lawmakers. The list also included the names of abortion rights advocates and healthcare officials, according to 2 law enforcement officials who could not discuss the details and spoke to the AP on condition of anonymity. So, The Night Janitor, again. I love Somewhere Over the Rainbow. That's probably one of my favorite recordings. I like all versions of it too. It's a great song. So, they're trying to run with this. Again, I have a lot of questions about this one. The weirdest one, and people are bringing this up, is the roommate thing, which this guy drenched in sweat. I know a lot of people are making fun of him for being a fat, overweight person drenched in sweat. Dude, I live maybe 2 hours away from where this interview took place, and if he's standing outside, and yes, the guy is a bit chunky too, but if he's standing outside when this interview is taking place on the day that it took place, I mean, I'm not chunky, and I was sweating balls on that day, so give the guy a break on that one. But the other side of that is the fact that guy's married, 5 kids, devout, religious, has a nice home, and yet he's out living with some Papa John's delivery guy. Who knows why? Let's listen.
Well, everyone's calling him a Democrat. He's not a Democrat. He would be offended if people called him a Democrat. So, but he, because of this board thing he was on for Governor Walz, it wasn't to serve. He was just serving the community. But he. I can't believe a political issue would cause him to do such a thing.
Did he ever bring up the senator or the representative who were targeted?
Like I was saying, no, he never talked about them. I didn't know those people. I didn't recognize their names.
Any politicians he mentioned?
Well, he mentioned Nancy Pelosi. He didn't like Jim Walz.
Tim Walz?
Didn't like Jim Biden. But
Tim Walz? What would you say about him?
Well, I mean, nothing. I mean, it's just normal. Well, I don't like this that Tim Walz did this. I don't like that they did that.
Did he mention the protests that were planned for yesterday?
He never mentioned the protest.
What do you make of everything that's happened here and the fact
Maybe
that
I mentioned it to him, but I don't think he mentioned anything about it.
What would you tell him?
I would tell him to surrender himself so he can be taken alive, because he's like my best friend, so I don't want him to be killed. I don't want him to kill anyone else, you know. So I think if I saw him, I could talk him down, but you know, I don't know where he is.
And did he listen to any particular podcasts or TV shows or anything online that concerns you?
Oh yeah, they're going to go back out and try to demonize the podcast bros. I bet you, and I've not listened to this clip before, I bet you one of the first things that comes out of this guy's mouth is Joe Rogan. Bet me?
Well, you listen to InfoWars.
I stand corrected.
I kind of told us that, well, it's like 50% truth. You know, I kind of said, don't take everything what they say for granted. I wasn't a real truthful. I mean, they're on for some things, but some things are way off on.
Did he talk much about Trump? And what did he say, if so?
I was a Trump supporter. Voted for Trump. If you like Trump. I like Trump. And,
Can you talk about his...
Yeah, I don't... There's still something off about this whole thing. All right, let's keep going. We got a little bit of other stuff to go on with this. Let's put some music back up. Oh, I missed the Skyloft song. We need to get back and finish off Skyward Sword. It's a lot of fun. But Baby on the Way and everything else, I haven't been able to take some time for it. Alright, let's see. Where are we at here? So, the No Kings rally in Minneapolis was canceled after this, but the St. Paul one went on. From the Pioneer Press, No Kings rally held in St. Paul. Other Minnesota events canceled after lawmaker shootings. Thousands of demonstrators turned out to protest Trump in St. Paul on Saturday, even as dozens of other No Kings events across Minnesota were canceled after 2 lawmakers and their spouses were shot overnight in what Walz called targeted political violence. About 40 No Kings events were planned in the state as part of a nationwide effort to counter-program President Trump's military parade being held Saturday in D.C. We'll be talking briefly about that one as well. That morning, over here it was hot as balls. With the suspect in the lawmaker shooting still at large, organizers of the Minnesota rallies said shortly before noon that they were calling off the events. For the safety of all involved, we're canceling all Minnesota events that are not already underway, they wrote on a statement posting to nokings.org and on the social media app Blue Sky. The announcement came as thousands of demonstrators had already begun marching from St. Paul College to the state capitol, where several speakers were slated to address the crowd. The march and the rally drew dozens of support organizations and upwards of 25,000 attendees. According to the Minnesota State Patrol, though, organizers with Indivisible Minnesota put the number closer to 80,000. Events maintained at at times a festival atmosphere despite overcast skies, with some marchers dressed as royalty or George Washington, while other marchers shed tears or carried signs expressing political frustration or grief over the shootings. So, they canceled that one, and I don't think that these things got as big of a turnout as people are trying to tell us that they did. I think that they got very good turnout, but I don't think it was what they were saying it was. From the Associated Press, anti-Trump demonstrators crowd streets, parks, and plazas across the U.S. Organizers say millions came. Well, 2 million is still millions, by the way, across the entire country with 330 million people. From Mark Levy, Claudia Lauer, and Jim Pertuno. Masses of demonstrators packed into the streets, parks, and plazas across the U.S. to protest Trump, marching through downtown, small towns, and blaring anti-authoritarian chants, mixed with support for protecting democracy and immigration's rights. Organizers of the No Kings demonstration said millions had marched, hundreds of events. Governments across the U.S. had urged calm and vowed no tolerance for violence, while some mobilized the National Guard ahead of marchers' gathering. Confrontations were isolated, but police in L.A., where protests over federal immigration enforcement raids erupted earlier and sparked demonstrations across the country, used tear gas and crowd control munitions to clear out protesters after the formal event ended. Officers in Portland also fired tear gas and projectiles to disperse a crowd that protested in front of the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement building as well into the evening. And in Salt Lake City, police were investigating shooting during a march downtown that left one person critically injured. 3 people were taken into custody, including a man believed to be the shooter, who also suffered a gunshot wound, according to the police chief, Brian Redd. So, realistically, I say the same thing I always say. I don't know. There was not a lot of coverage of these. Like, I was expecting to see pages upon pages upon pages of, hey, here's a photo of this march and here's I didn't see that. I don't think this was as big of a one as our friends on the left want us to believe that this was. NPR gives us 3 takeaways from the military parade and No Kings protest on Trump's birthday. From Alana Wise, Kat Lonsdorf, and Claire Marie Schneider. 1. Stormy clouds didn't rain on the parade. Despite threats of lightning and storms rolling into D.C., the parade went on as advertised. It featured dozens of tanks and artillery vehicles such as HIMARS, aircraft including Blackhawks and Apaches, more than 6,000 uniformed troops. The idea was to walk viewers through the history of the American military conflict, with some historical uniforms and vehicles being used. Additionally, 34 horses, 2 mules, and a dog, a blue heeler named Doc Holliday, joined the march. Mike Davis, a 30-year serviceman who was at the parade as a spectator, said he welcomed the flashy affair, that the military had been overdue for a big bash. The last time we've had a military parade of any sorts, I recall, is the Gulf War, so it's been a long time, and what better way to celebrate the 250th? 2. Trump got the thing he wanted for years. Trump wanted to hold the parade during his first term, but it was scrapped because it deemed too expensive. It was inspired after attending the annual Bastille Day parade in France. In 17, the parade that celebrates French mobs taking over the Bastille State Prison in 1789. In closing remarks following Saturday's procession, he hailed the army as the greatest, fiercest, bravest fighting force the world had ever seen. The army keeps us free, makes us strong, and tonight, you've all made Americans very proud. Every other country celebrates their victories. It's about time America did too. That's what we're doing right. After a speech, Trump was presented with a traditionally folded American flag, a gift usually reserved for the family members of fallen soldiers. Since the parade was announced, there's been a sharp criticism, particularly from Democratic lawmakers who called the showcase self-indulgent and a misuse of public funds. Which is hilarious because this whole thing got planned under the Biden admin. And yes, protests spring up across the country. More than 2,000 planned protests. Tens of thousands marched peacefully in Philadelphia. So, a lot of these things were really, really big in big, big blue cities. They tried to say that over in Eau Claire there were like 2,000 people. I wasn't in town that day, but I legitimately feel like there'd be more evidence of it if there'd been that many. Back on the No Kings side, Missouri governor activates National Guard, declares a state of emergency, which thankfully was not needed, but it's good to have that preemptive force. Mike Kehoe on Thursday declared a state of emergency and activated the National Guard in anticipation of protests across the state and in response to civil unrest across the country. Missouri EO 2525 declares a state of emergency and allows the Adjutant General to order service members to aid state officials. The order came after the Missouri State Highway Patrol, Missouri National Guard, and Missouri Department of Public Safety established a unified command to monitor situations across the state and prepare local law enforcement. I think after January 6th, a lot of people looked at this and said, no, we're not gonna wait. An armed man was arrested at a protest and had more than a dozen explosives at home, from Danny Freeman. A 31-year-old Pennsylvania man initially arrested on suspicion of illegally carrying a gun near a No Kings protest outside Philly was rearrested this week after investigators found a pipe bomb and several other explosives in his home, authorities said. Kevin Krebs of Melbourne in suburban Chester County is facing charges including felony possession and manufacture of weapons of mass destruction, according to County District Attorney's Office and court documents. CNN has sought comment from an attorney for Krebs. Do we have any idea on what his political affiliation was? I'm guessing I know because it isn't plastered all over the CNN article. And there was a fatal shooting in Utah at the rally. Utah investigators sought help from the public on Wednesday as they worked to unravel who was at fault when a safety volunteer at a weekend No Kings rally fired at an alleged gunman who inadvertently hit and killed a protester. The safety volunteer, who has not been identified publicly, fired 3 rounds at Arturo Gamboa, who allegedly brandished a rifle at Saturday's crowd in downtown Salt Lake City. The gunshots hit both Gamboa and a protester, Arthur Falasa Alu, according to the Salt Lake City police. Gamboa, who did not fire his rifle, was arrested on suspicion of murder. Accused of creating a dangerous situation that led to Alu's death, the police said, but no criminal charges have been filed against Gamboa as of Wednesday afternoon. Investigators are looking at whether the safety volunteer was justified in firing his gun, according to the police. It's hilarious, by the way, that they arrested the guy on suspicion of murder when it was the policeman who murdered somebody. We investigated ourselves and found that we've done nothing wrong. And a Salvadorian journalist was arrested while streaming a No Kings protest, could face deportation. From Marlon Sorto, Brian Stelter, and Carol Alvarado, because of course it's Brian Stelter. A Salvadorian journalist who has built a big social media following by documenting immigration raids may be facing deportation. Mario Guevara, who was arrested during a No Kings protest near Atlanta last Saturday, was transferred to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement early Wednesday. A spokesperson for ICE in Atlanta confirmed to CNN. Although a state judge had granted him release without bail, ICE authorities requested that he remain detained due to his immigration status. This led the Committee to Protect Journalists express outrage about Guevara's continued detention on Tuesday. ICE's involvement, which could lead to Guevara's deportation, is a crude form of censorship. Said Catherine Jacobson, Committee's U.S., Canada, and Caribbean Program Coordinator. Based on just things that were said about my friend Stephen in the January 6th incident, I do want to say specifically on this situation that I don't care. You live streamed yourself committing the crime, in this case being in the U.S. after deportation. Then you get the consequences of being in the U.S. facing deportation. And if you didn't like it, you shouldn't live stream yourself committing the crime. That's what they said about my friend Stephen, but I know that it's different because Stephen is considered to be conservative and was doing... He was at the protest. He was causing the riot for Trump, according to them. So he should get no mercy whatsoever. You guys made the rules. I'm just following them. That's an op-ed. I'm going to skip that one. One of the things that was come about this too, and basically where I look and I see these protests go, has to do with the attention. Because a lot of people are doing this and they're just looking to have some sort of clout off of this one. Josiah Waters with an idea of how to shut down a lawless protest without a single baton. Step 1, kill the cell signal, full blackout, no bars, no Wi-Fi, no live streams. Keep their ability to go back and do 911 calls in case somebody gets hurt, but if they can't go back and stream out their signs, protests, and get their internet clout, then they have nothing to stream to. 2, watch them flail, confused, disconnected, holding up useless phones like relics of a vanished power. The audience is gone, the performance ends. And without attention, the theater collapses. No likes, no shares, no riot. Alright. What else do I have anything else that I really want to get to at this point? Talked about the Army Parade. We've talked about immigration. I don't know enough about the Brad Lander thing. We'll skip that for now. Let's switch gears. Let's do things I like, things I hate. And we'll head out of here for the day. We'll stop it at just about 3 hours. So, when we end out the show, we go through and we look at some things that I hate, some things that I like, which I've actually got a short stack on this one. And we look at the Ferengi rules of acquisition, the commandments of the Ferengi religion that dictate how they interact with species around the galaxy and each other, and how this can be used in capitalism on our own in real life. If this is something that I've seen in Deep Space Nine, I talk about how it gets used in the show. I talk about how the rule can be applied to real life, or if it is an honest and full-out mockery of capitalism, how it is a mockery of capitalism. So, let's see. Last time we did the 102nd rule of acquisition, nature decays, but latinum lasts forever. Now we are at 103rd rule of acquisition. Sleep can interfere with opportunity. This is from the rules of acquisition. Now, yes, they were sitting here talking in Quark using this. This was mostly a mockery of capitalism, saying that sleep, yeah, there's no time to sleep because that interferes with your ability to have opportunity. But realistically, I mean, you got to have your ears open all the time. You got to sleep sometime because otherwise you can't sit back and negotiate effectively. But always, if you can't do it yourself, have your alerts set up, because if opportunity is there, the earlier bird gets the worm. It's a balancing act, legitimately. At some points you have to say, hey, we can't do this, we gotta sleep. But in other times we have to sit back and say, yeah, there's opportunity out there, and if we sleep on it, the next guy gets it. The guy who's up all night gets it. So that is your 103rd rule of acquisition. Let's do a couple things that I hate, and we'll finish off with some things that I like. Although I'm getting a little bit squirmy here, so I might have to get up and pee in the midst of this. My feed froze over on Rumble. That's fun. Let's put a refresh on that. Alright, some things that I hate. The same thing that they always try to say. Social Security's insolvency is now a year earlier. Here's how it could impact your benefits. Social Security has been insolvent since the day it started. So, because people at the start of the program could go back and pull their full life's pension from this immediately as soon as it started. So it's never been solvent, and it's not going to be solvent. I mean, you could sit back and acquire all the wealth from every billionaire in history and it won't keep Social Security going for 10 years. So it's always a solvent. I've already resigned myself to the fact that there's not going to be any Social Security by the time that I retire. So I am looking into other benefits at this point, because yeah, there's no way that I can sit back and have my family go without any of it. Did my mouse just die? I think my mouse died. I think we're gonna have to go plug that in. No, it's still on. There it goes. Let's see, what else do we have in things that I hate? So this lady is offended by the fact that In-N-Out Burger put a Bible verse on her cup. And we'll listen to the video, but what I'm going to say with this, of course, is, I mean, In-N-Out Burger has been known for doing this for a very, very long time, and you did willingly go and enter into...
Really don't like that it put a Bible verse on my food without my consent. I don't want to eat junk.
We get the wrong video. Skip ad. The ads on Rumble are so cringe, by the way, too. I don't know if we're losing internet right now or what's going on with that, but I don't know if the bandwidth is all sucked up or where we go with that. I don't know what's happening right now. Anyway, yeah, if it would be like going to Chick-fil-A and being mad that you got wished a blessed day, because you know that they're going to go back and do that. So let's see what this person has to say.
Really don't like that it put a Bible verse on my food without my consent. I don't want to eat John 3:16. Get your John 3:16 out of here. Really don't.
Again, you willingly entered into the exchange with In-N-Out Burger, and also knowing, by the way, that your money goes to people that believe that. So this one is really on you. Like, I didn't go to Burger King for a very long time based on their beliefs on what they consider to be acceptable conduct. I have since turned back on that, and it's still really good, and I go there occasionally again. But yeah, I didn't go there for a long time based on their Chick Fries commercial, which has been scrubbed from the internet at this point, and their lemongrass and climate change commercial, because I thought it was just so cringe. Other things that I hate: Elon Musk, of course, having to post his drug test results after New York Times accused him of being an addict, because this is where we're at right now. Test every member of Congress at that. I hate the fact that we even have to go back and do this still. I'm going to skip the Padilla stuff because I don't know enough about this, but I'm going to keep it on the stack because I want to watch it. Maybe we'll talk about it next time. And the last couple on things that I hate go to this one here. NBC News with the most misleading headline that's out there. The Trump admin will shut down the National LGBTQ Youth Suicide Lifeline, the 988 Suicides and Crisis Line, in 30 days. Presenting this as if they're putting and shutting down the entire suicide crisis line, which they are not, by the way. They're changing out the option, and I'm not a big fan of this in and of itself, based on the fact of, I do think that it's a good idea to have a specific line to help work with specific people based on the crisis that you're going through. But I hate, and this came out of the things I hate though, because of the fact that the headline makes it look like they're shutting down the entire system. Just reading briefly from NBC News on the original article. Trump admin to shut down LGBTQ youth suicide hotline. So, the agency said it will no longer silo LGBT plus youth services, notably removing the T representing the trans community in the initialism, to focus on serving all help seekers, including those previously served through the Press 3 option. Again, if you're in crisis, having somebody there that's ready and trained in your specific issue, I think is a better option than just going through general help. But no, the suicide prevention hotline is not going away right now. So NBC News can stop the sensationalism. And we've got a couple more just on the same vein here. Mrs. Penny Oaken, Skywitch, says, if you were added to the Hate Enablers block list because you followed JD Vance and you want to appeal being added to the Hate Enablers block list, you must unfollow Vance and all other hate mongers on this platform, and then follow instructions over on Blue Sky, because, well, yeah, the moderators are sitting here and deciding who gets to do what. And yeah, there's probably good reason for Blue Sky people to go back and follow Vance. They want to be the first person to come out here and say, see, he said something hateful. Look at him, he's so hateful. Look at how hateful he is. You know, like they do the people who constantly sit and refresh Trump's True Social feed day in and day out. But yeah, Vance in and of himself. Vance went out and joined Blue Sky, and he went down into the, what they would say, the lion's den. But he was almost immediately banned. He said, just set up my page on Blue Sky, hope to see you guys there. And a load of people coming in and saying, not found because account has been suspended. Because it's really, really free speech over there, apparently. From the New York Post, JD Vance gets suspended from ex-competitor Blue Sky just 12 minutes after first post. Now, Blue Sky is coming back and saying that this was a mistake, obviously, but, you know, somebody through there went back and banned it. Blue Sky explains why JD Vance was briefly suspended from the platform. From Sonam Sheth. Social media website Blue Sky issued a statement Wednesday explaining why President Vance was briefly suspended from the platform earlier in the day. Give me just a sec, I go check a message here. Oh, no, that is a reel. So, we'll check that after the show, which will be wrapping up here in just a moment. Let's see. Less than half an hour later, in a statement to Newsweek Wednesday, a spokesperson for the platform said Vance's account was removed because Blue Sky's system flagged him as a potential imposter. Yeah, no, that's crap. That is crap. That's them coming back out and trying to get around all that. Alright, let's do some things I like. Let's head out of here for the day after that. A couple things that I like. A couple little wholesome stories here. The Fat Electrician says, we owe Ford a huge thank you. In 2023, they were granted a patent for playing ads on car infotainment systems. And by the way, it wasn't just playing the ads. It was the information gathering as well to figure out what ads to go back and present out to you. But instead of using it, Ford claims they filed the patent to prevent anyone else from doing it. After a few years, it looks like they weren't lying, because nobody wants to live in a world where you have to watch an ad or pay for premium just to start your car. So, good on that. And yes, confirmed from Kelley Blue Book, this is from last year. Ford files patent for in-car ads. You knew they were coming, you knew it was coming. That doesn't make the moment any less dreadful, but we'll end the story by explaining it might not be coming at all. Ford filed an application to patent a system that would track where you're driving, listen to your conversations in the car, and use the data to serve you ads in the car speakers and screens. Documents filed with the U.S. Patent Office shows that the system could use GPS destinations in the car to advertise stops along your route. If you're traveling to a grocery store, it might suggest products on sale or suggest an alternate store. It could learn your preference. For instance, Ford said the system might present one visual advertisement to passengers every 10 minutes, but user preferences may indicate the passenger responds positively to audio advertisements, so the system might be more frequent, such as presenting audio advertisements every 5 minutes. But some good news. Now that you're full of existential dread and considering buying a used car from the 70s, here's a little good news. Automakers' patent technologies never use all the they never use all the time. So basically, what they're saying with this is that Ford bought this so that they can't use it, then nobody else can go back out and do this. So that is some good news indeed. Alright, couple more. That's one I just found wholesome. Wholesome capitalism right here. With Switch 2's out of stock, this is from The Gamer, one Target decided to fill shelves with a long discontinued Nintendo game console because for whatever reason, they still had Wii U sitting in the back. And you can go to this Target, which, let me see if they tell me where it is. Let's see. They don't say where. But yeah, they went out and they had a bunch of Wii U's still sitting in the back room, and they put them on the shelf for $100. So if you can find that, and I'll do some searching after this as well, you can go and get a Wii U for $100. Which I'd like to add one of those to my collection as well. And the last thing, and that's partially because I really have to pee right now. Under Trump, blue-collar wages soar at the fastest rate since 1969. Real wages for hourly workers are up nearly 2% the first 5 months of Trump's presidency, and the strongest growth in 60 years. So, yes, we're here. It is time. The wages are coming up, so hopefully this means that we'll start getting some of these houses sold, and maybe we can ease the interest rates. Alright, we gotta throw the outro music up. I really gotta go. Where's my outro music? Where's my outro music? Sorry for the abrupt ending, but it's been 3 hours and I have had that much coffee. Plus my energy drink. Alright. Well, thank you everybody who came by and hung out in the live chat. It's been a blast. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. We got through almost everything this time, and we didn't go for 4 whole hours. We'll be back next week for more news, more headlines, more contemporary. Hey, maybe we'll have an end to this war. Maybe we'll know more about Vance Belter. And hey, maybe the Republic will fall. I hope not, but we will see what happens with that. Take care, you guys. Have a great weekend. We will see you here next time for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. And, well, until we meet again, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Take care. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.